right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order. This is the March 12th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission and Urban Forestry Board. I'd like to welcome the members of the public, both those here in person as well as those online. Well as welcome city staff and consultants and my fellow commissioners. Speaking of which, we will have a roll call of those commissioners. Please.
Okay, we have Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Commissioner Felios.
Here.
Commissioner Summer. Here. Vice Chair Mitchner.
Here.
And Chair David.
Here. Thank you for that. I'd like to, before we get going with public comment, I'd like to acknowledge that the PRC, the commission does receive communications from the public that are written and typically presented through the PRC email, and staff sends those to us. So please know that I and my fellow commissioners do read all those communications that are sent to the PRC, and we appreciate the input. So with that, we didn't have a meeting in February. Our last meeting was January the 15th. At that meeting, it was a brief meeting. We reviewed the minutes. We heard from the public. We had input on events, and we elected officers. And we had some staff announcements. So are there any comments about those minutes? Any comments from members of the public? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. And a vote call.
Okay, we have Commissioner Summer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Commissioner Felios.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mitchner.
Yes.
Chair David.
Yes. Okay, on to the agenda. The next item are full communications from the public. We have several things on the agenda this evening. We'll hear from the public. We're going to get input from commission members on council priorities, and then we'll hear about the park strategic plan, level of service methodology, and then some staff announcements. For each of those agenda items, public will be available to speak or comment. This next session is for oral communications on anything that's not on the agenda. So if you wish to address the commission, please present a blue card to Allison or indicate that you'd like to speak. And Allison, we have a cards there.
We do. These are all 5.2. The only one I'm not sure about is the Friends of Deer Hollow Farm. Is that for? Yeah. Okay. And I'll give you a verbal 1 minute, just.
Yeah,
one.
I'll be sure.
And if you're not required to, but if you could introduce yourself.
I am Lubob Sheet Davis. I'm the president of Friends of Deer Hollow Farm. And last February, the commission received our fiscal year 24 annual report. And I really just wanted to acknowledge the wonderful partnership with the Community Services Department and highlight that we provided $120,000 in support for Deer Hollow Farm, about $43,000 to fund the animals, about $38,000 in farm enhancements and operations support, and about $37,000 to fund scholarships for students across Silicon Valley, including about 875 students from Mountain View schools across 6 different schools. And I really just wanted to put a face with the name and be here to answer any questions that council may have about the Friends of Deer Hollow Farm.
Thank you for that. Ms. Sheet Davis. Thank you.
Good. Be sure to come to spring farm tours.
And then we do, I believe, have one hand raised online. It just says iPhone, so I don't have a name. If somebody is in, yeah.
All right,
Hello, my name is Dan Shane.
please proceed, Mr. Shane. You have
Okay, thank
minutes.
you very much. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm raising an issue and a concern about how the city might be not handling the urban forestry issues maybe the best way they could. There's an example of an urban forest on Cypress Point Drive that the fire department issued a directive to the developer or the owner of the land to remove a fire hazard. The fire hazard consisted of massive amounts of deadwood, fallen trees that were laying on the forest floor. So Avalon, there was no work plan required, there was no monitoring required, and there was no coordination between departments required for this project. And that's really my main point of the issue that I'm raising is the coordination problem. And as a result of the work they did, they pretty much butchered part of the forest. They cut off live branches of trees. No rhyme or reason on what they were doing. When I reported that to the city, the response that I got back was that they were just removing the bushes based on the photographs that you sent me. However, the tree branches, and there were many, many tree branches from the live trees that were cut off, were at least 20 to 25 feet in height. So they weren't bushes, they were actually the trees. So I was a little confused with that response from the city. And I think in these situations, we need better coordination between the departments so we ensure that damage is not done to our urban forests. Work plans, time schedules, monitoring, as well as coordinating with other departments that may have a stake in like an urban forest when they're required to remove a fire hazard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda? Steinhauser?
Seeing some here. Good evening, Shanae Kleinhaus with Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance. I was happy to see that boring owls still persist and that staff is following and reporting on their presence. I did mention to you and to staff that banding the boring owls is extremely, extremely important for long-term monitoring of what's happening, not only in our county, but for the efforts that are taking place statewide now. And so banding is difficult and it's expensive. And there is no one that is qualified right now to do this work, as far as I know. So I just wanted to ask you and staff to make sure that the owls this year, whatever young emerge from the nests, are banded. And it can be expensive because they don't all emerge at once. You don't always capture them. So you have to have somebody with the right permit. The biologist that used to be working for the city had that permit and he could do it, but there is not a lot of other people in the region who can. And so since he's on leave, I'm hoping that the city invests in finding a biologist who has that kind of permit and having a contract in place before the time that the boring owls emerge from the nests and flesh. It's really, really scientifically important. And we already have a few months that it wasn't done last year and needs to be done this year. Thank you.
Hazard. Do we have any other hands or members of the public that wish to speak on items not on the agenda?
No one online.
All right. Thank you. We'll proceed with agenda items 5.1. The next item is for advisory body input on the fiscal year 25-26 and 26-27 council work plan potential projects. And we'll have senior management analyst Lindsay Vaughn provide us with a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, I'm Lindsay Wong, Senior Management Analyst for the Community Services Department. And tonight I'm presenting this on behalf of the City Manager's Office. The topic tonight is the fiscal year 2025 through 27 Council Work Plan Strategic Priorities Affirmation and Project Identification. So every 2 years, the City Council adopts a work plan that establishes Council's top priority initiatives, which along with other special projects and ongoing core services contribute to the City Council's 7 strategic priorities. The current fiscal year's 2023 through 2025 work plan concludes at the end of June 2025, and the status of projects from that work plan can be found in attachment 1 to the memo. At the February 25th council meeting, the City Council affirmed their 7 strategic priorities, which are community for all, intentional development and housing options, mobility and connectivity, sustainability and climate resiliency, livability and quality of life, economic vitality, and organizational strength and good governance. Past council work plans have been comprehensive and robust with a range of 40 to 70 projects, and it has been challenging to successfully initiate or complete every project within the 2-year work plan timeframe. So this iceberg graphic here demonstrates how staff resources are allocated with council work plan projects and other important time-limited projects above the waterline and ongoing day-to-day operations below the waterline. So it's estimated that 85% of staff capacity is directed toward the ongoing activities below the waterline. So given this limited capacity, the council has taken on an approach to focus on quality over quantity for the upcoming work plan. And the targeted number of projects for the final work plan is 10 to 14, with an emphasis on projects that contribute to those 7 strategic priorities. One second. The slides aren't moving. Okay. Okay, so this slide is to orient us as to where we are in the process. So there have been a couple of council meetings so far this year related to the work plan process. Most recently, on February 25th, there was a council study session to discuss the potential projects to be included in the work plan. And in advance of that meeting, council members submitted projects for consideration. And at that meeting, they determined which projects should be analyzed and brought to the advisory bodies for input on prioritization. And so every advisory body is receiving the same presentation from staff. I'm not sure why that keeps happening. Okay. So staff is currently analyzing the projects recommended by council using the following criteria. So whether the project contributes to the 7 strategic priorities and council goals, whether a project is discretionary or non-discretionary, the fiscal impact, the legal impact, the duration and timing of the project, and staff capacity. This staff analysis, as well as feedback from advisory bodies, will be brought to the April 22nd council meeting for final project prioritization and selection. And then the final adoption of the work plan will take place on June 24th. So for today's process, we are asking that each advisory body member share up to 3 projects that they believe are most important. And then staff will then tally the number of times that each project is identified and document and include any other feedback that you might have, which will be included into the April 22nd council study session memo. And this is the list of potential projects recommended by council. The scope and definition of each project is still being refined by staff as part of the analysis that will be further reviewed at the council meeting on April 22nd. But in the meantime, I can just provide a high-level overview of what each project is intended to do. So number 1 is to complete funding agreements and begin engineering for the Stevens Creek Trail extension. This is an existing project The extension would continue the trail southward to Sunnyvale and increase access to the trail. The completion of the extension is a large project that has a timeline beyond the 2-year work plan. So the focus of this work plan item is on the funding agreements and the design engineering needed as the framework of the project. Number 2 is to develop a strategy to facilitate low and moderate income homeownership, including addressing barriers to condo development. This is an existing project that seeks to make home ownership opportunities more attainable with an emphasis on entry-level and first-time homeowners. The city has not seen much condo development, so this project also includes looking at barriers citywide and ways to support additional development. Number 3 is to update R3 zoning standards. This is an existing project. City staff are working on revisions to the R3 zoning development standards that consider form-based standards, incentivizing stacked flats, and updating row house design guidelines. The update can better address neighborhood conditions, enable more diverse housing, and create more predictable outcomes. Number 4 is to develop a plan for ending the flow of natural gas by 2045 as part of the decarbonization strategy. The city currently has a goal to reach carbon neutrality by the year 2045, and this project would add a goal to stop the flow of natural gas at the same time. Number 5 is to update the Race Equity and Inclusion Action Plan. This is an existing project that supports the city's Community for All strategic priority. This project is primarily focused on the city's legislative priorities related to race equity and inclusion and other actions that the city can take to support our diverse community. Number 6 is to expand access to broadband citywide. This is the continuation of an existing project. The City Council had a study session on February 25th that discussed the broadband needs assessment and gap analysis. And this project would take the initial steps to address the findings of that study, including the development of a conceptual broadband network design. Number 7 is to implement smart water meters. This project would design and implement a smart water meter system that allows for remote meter reading and improved customer leak detections. Number 8 is to explore placing an amendment to the city charter and a revenue measure on the 2026 ballot. This project would introduce a ballot measure to modernize language, remove outdated provisions, and clean up the city charter. And additionally, this project includes a proposed revenue measure in response to the city's projected budget forecast over the next couple of years. Number 9 is to review and make periodic amendments to the municipal code in a phased approach to remove contradictory, unenforceable, or otherwise outdated sections. This project would update the muni code to make it more flexible and or enforceable where needed. Adding this to the council work plan would provide staff the time needed to do this review and make these changes. Number 10 is to establish design standards for streamlined and improved project development. This would create design standards and set expectations for developers in order to move projects through the review process more quickly. This project is intended to support well-planned developments that benefit both the community and urban growth throughout the city. Number 11 is to pilot an autonomous vehicle shuttle. This would complement our current community shuttle with an autonomous vehicle and explores the potential of autonomous vehicles as a mass transit option for the city. Number 12 is to develop a downtown vacant storefront window display and pop-up program. This project would create a program to activate vacant spaces and create a more vibrant downtown. Number 13 is to increase the pavement index to 71. So this project would explore funding opportunities and develop strategies to improve the overall condition of the city's street pavement and raise the pavement condition index from 67 to 71. Number 14 is to update council policies, legislative contract templates, and other documents. This project would review and update outdated standards in order to help the organization be more efficient. Number 15 is to create a framework to support volunteer organizations that work with the city. This would provide clear guidelines and a framework for volunteer organizations that would like to partner with us. This would specifically include groups that interact and collaborate with staff regularly and would potentially streamline processes for staff to more effectively partner with these groups. And then number 16 is to implement an interim pickleball plan. So this project would initiate a short-term solution to increase access to pickleball while the city continues to work on a feasibility study to determine permanent pickleball court opportunities. So that is the list of projects. And with that, thank you for your time.
Yes.
So as a reminder, you don't need to make a motion tonight. Each of you will just share your top 3 project priorities, and I will document that along with any other feedback that you'd like to share about the projects.
Great, thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Pretty straightforward. Each of us will provide our 3 inputs without an attempt to harmonize or reach consensus. Before we do that, are there any questions from the commission? Ms. Fields?
No questions.
I did have a question about the Stevens Creek Trail Extension. This is specifically about working with Sunnyvale on the next phase of 3-city
Yeah.
organization.
Yes.
And the number 10, the design standards, would that include open space planting standards for development? We usually have like a fort. What the PRC gets is trees on private property. And the development pieces that go to the community development are kind of on their own universe. Would design standards like that be a place where we could bring the standards of community services and community development closer to each other? Is that at least a possibility?
As far as I understand, I think that could be part of the scope. So I will say staff are, again, kind of working on refining the recommended scopes for each of these projects. My understanding of that one, based on the council members that spoke to it, is that it's just general design standards for development. So it potentially could include CSD related, like open space standards or planting guidelines. And if that is feedback that the PRC wants to recommend that is included, I can also document or pass that along.
I'm having trouble understanding why some of those are on the council list because given that they're already underway and why they weren't, you used the analogy of an iceberg and why they weren't below the water line. For example, the R3 zoning standards, the city's been working on that for like 3 years. So I'm confused why they had to be turned into a council priority
Sure.
to begin with.
Yeah, so
Speak to that.
yeah, thank you for the question. So yes, multiple of those are already on the existing council work plan or are being worked on by staff already in some capacity. I think that the idea of elevating it to the next work plan and keeping it on the work plan is just to show that it's a high priority for staff. And I think the intent is that staff would prioritize these projects over, potentially other projects. And I think also including it on the next work plan is to, ensure or hope that it gets completed within that 2-year timeframe. So I think that if some of these don't make it onto the work plan, it's not necessarily that staff are going to stop working on these. It's just that we might be prioritizing other projects.
Okay, I think I understand. Thanks.
Any questions?
Yeah, on number 8, the revenue measure, could that potentially include money for parks acquisition?
I believe so.
Good.
It could.
Okay, the ask here is for the commission to each contribute up to 3 inputs. Before we do that, are there any comments from the public on this agenda item?
Sorry, I didn't know where this up. A lot of people in the audience worked in the technology industry, and as part of that, we go through this process for product development. And one of the things we do and we look at is cost of the product, the impact of the product, the likelihood of success of the project, and how many people it's going to affect, and what's going to be effect on the existing projects that we're working on currently. So for instance, if I have one key programmer and I'm going to have to pull him off of a project to work on another project, that might create a real problem, even if it's a small project. Like for instance, in this particular case, we're going to do a pickleball project. Nothing against pickleball, but we haven't done our Parks and Rec plan yet. And if it's key, maybe it's not. But I would hate to be in your shoes to pick out 3 without knowing how much each of these is going to cost. One might cost 100 times more than another, but we don't know that. Who it's going to affect, how likely is it to succeed, and where are the resources going to come from, both staff-wise and cost-wise. To me, this is a very haphazard way of doing development, and that's just from my experience in business. This is not how business does it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Celia Pamer, resident of Mountain View. I think one thing I look at this is I do see a very big shift from last year's goals. And I guess from a Parks and Rec standpoint, you spent, I don't know, hour and a half last year deciding which of the goals to pursue. And so I'd be interested in like how many of those have gotten done. So I know we're working on them, but I hope that we get those done. Maybe as a higher priority than starting new projects, because hopefully they're already at least partially done. I know we had the dark sky ordinance on there, the biodiversity master plan, the Parks and Rec master plan, all of those were considered top priorities last year, and I hope that they stay top priority. As very few of these are kind of in our green sphere. I mean, there are some, don't get me wrong, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Ms. Kleinhauser?
Thank you. Jenny Kleinhaus with Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance again. I'm not sure whether staff is still working on the dark sky ordinance, which was on the priority list, and a lot of people advocated for that. I don't see it here, so I don't know what the status is, and it doesn't really give you a lot of information on what's already being done and what is new or relatively new. I wanted to mention in relation to that, with the Stevens Creek Trail, there have been people that advocate for the trail that are also been advocating for lighting up the trail. Some of the EIRs for the existing trail and the Valley Water recommend against it. And I hope that is not included, lighting up a creekside trail in any potential work on this trail. The other thing that I just wanted to mention, because I participated in that feasibility process many years ago, that area is very difficult to reach. And I walked there, and between 85 and the creek, some places there's a foot of distance. You basically have to hold to dear life not to fall in quite deep. So there were plans to cantilever a trail off the sound wall of the freeway. That is really absurd, both in terms of cost and in terms of danger and in terms of the creek. So please be careful before you step into something that is not really feasible, extremely expensive, and sort of aspirational. But if you do, keep the lights out of there. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more comment.
Hi, thank you and good evening. My name is Emily Dana. I want to speak in favor of item 16, implement an interim pickleball plan. As you know from the many meetings that we have had in the Park and Rec Commission of Mountain View, pickleball is a very popular sport. And I think it aligns very well with the city's priorities of community for all and livability and quality of life. Because pickleball is not only a sport that is accessible to all, it can be played with any level of fitness for people of any age. I have my son who is 10-year-old who plays pickleball. I myself play pickleball with my husband. I see people on the court who are 70, 80 years old, and all of them, whatever their background, their age, their fitness level, they play together. I have often heard by many of them that pickleball has changed their social life. They have made many friends on the court, that they no longer feel lonely. And so I think this is a really great opportunity to meet these strategic priorities. And in particular, it's cheap by using existing infrastructure to make space for pickleball. It doesn't require a lot of capital and it doesn't require a lot of time. So I think this is a great item. Again, pickleball has been discussed many times, and I think it's time to really take action. And I hope you will prioritize this item 16. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. I would see a hand up if there was someone online. Is that right?
Actually, check. You do have one hand up. And for those that spoke, if you didn't fill out a blue card, if you could. We do have two hands. So we have Mike Rogers.
So, Mr. Rogers, if you can unmute yourself and proceed.
Hi, my name is Mike Rogers. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I'm a former president of Mountain View Tennis Club and an instructor in the junior team tennis. I want to talk about pickleball. I'm not a pickleball player, but it's a great sport and we've developed a great community here and its needs are not being met. What bothers me is after many hours of discussion and many years of discussion, the scope of what appears as a proposed project doesn't appear to be adequate. If interim pickleball solution is only cannibalizing more tennis courts at Rangsdorf, it's grossly inadequate to what the current pickleball community's needs are, as further compromises the city contracted obligations to Mountain View Tennis Club, contract that goes back decades that I've been involved in even updating in past years. This is grossly inadequate for even the current pickleball needs. We have hundreds of players waiting at times. Palo Alto, a city locally renowned for moving very slowly on just about everything, did this much faster, more successfully, already has 16 dedicated pickleball courts at Mitchell Park, where the share are completely used and people are waiting for that many courts. Why has Mountain View become the slowest, most administratively slow municipality for progress here? It's not unlike our past history and reputation in these areas. We've been a leader in recreation. We've been a model for the other cities. This issue is nearly 10 years old and getting exponentially worse every year. If the scope is building some pickleball courts, whether that's using the 939 San Rafael property or different proposals for existing hardscape, like the adjacent courts of 5 and 6 at Cuesta, where you already have hardscape that would cover about half the space needed for 8 pickleball courts. That could be an interim solution. But looking through the strategic plan as well, which is a later agenda item, it looks grossly inadequate. It says we only need 6 more pickleball courts, right? If we had 16, I imagine those would be full and people would be waiting as well. Even through 2034, it only shows a need for 7 more pickleball courts. Seems grossly inadequate. So I think your job as the commissioners is to provide guidance to the council. Tell them they need to scope this, right? Any interim solution that is just cannibalizing more existing tennis courts is woefully inadequate, both to the pickleball community, but also is putting entities, many functional uses of the tennis courts, our recreational tennis center out of business. The Mountain View Tennis Club could be out of business if you start taking more courts and you're already using, and doesn't serve either community well at this point. There ought to be interim solutions that cost a smaller amount of money to provide larger number of pickleball courts. That's what's really needed. And we're way behind the other cities in this particular aspect. So I'm not a pickleball player, but I love the community. It's much like the tennis community. It's a great sport. And I thoroughly encourage us to figure out how to make this move a little faster than waiting for the recreational strategic plan to decide to get off the ground several years from now. That just seems to me grossly inadequate. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Okay, next we have Rosemary.
Rosemary?
My name is Rosemary, and I am just simply a resident. I do love to play both pickleball and tennis. My only worry is that it goes towards cannibalizing the green spaces. And if I look at the feedback that the public has provided again and again, then recreational, walking, being able to walk in the green. I am a dog owner. I'm just worried that it goes towards the green side of the park, that disappears more and more, and it just becomes more and more concrete. One of the options that could be possible is there's, of course, the annex in the park as well. That is a fantastic space that could be, there could be a lot done with greenery there. For current dog walkers, the problem there is that there is a lot of plants that are actually really very sticky to fur. And so it's not easy to walk, which is why there's a lot of people that walk their dogs on the left side of the park, where some of the interim pickleball also has been foreseen. And so I would just encourage to really look at the planning and see if there's then an alternative way to make the same amount of green space that you're maybe taking away for the pickleball courts. That would be my request. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Blackhorse.
Next we have Rashmi.
Hi.
Rashmi?
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Okay,
Please.
great. Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention, kind of echo what Celia was saying, but that we should focus on the projects that we set out to do last year, especially the finishing up this Parks and Rec strategic plan and the biodiversity and urban forestry strategic plan. I believe that the pickleball issue and several other issues that have been brought up will be covered by that. And so, if we follow the process and we heed the input that the community has provided for those plans, we are addressing everyone's issues and concerns in a methodological and fair way. And so I would just encourage this commission to urge for those plans to be finished so that we can both fairly incorporate the feedback from the public that we have spent a lot of time doing over 2024 and address the individual concerns of different communities while also ensuring that we are protecting our green spaces, because that's one of the big things that the public has indicated over and over again is the most important when it comes to parks and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi. And Allison, anyone else online?
No one else online.
All right, with that, commissioners, I think we have a simple task, which is to articulate 3 of among the list of 16. So I think we'll just hear your 3 choices and any supplemental comments you wish to make. If that's all right, we'll just work our way down the line.
Sure.
Commissioner Mitchner, you want to
Yeah,
start
I
us
mean,
off?
this is a task that's come to us each year from City Council for, I don't know, last 4 or 5 years. It comes to us without a lot of background information. It's always a little bit unclear whether we're supposed to have our Parks and Rec hat on and just pick parks projects, or whether we have our resident hat on and try to do something for the greater good of the city. So that's always a little bit of a dilemma. I would encourage you, anybody who wants important input on this, to go to city council meetings and to communicate with city council, because that's where the decision is actually going to be made on that. So with that little preamble, I will my 3, and these are all good projects, and I will cast my, it's not even a vote, but number 1, I would read it if you need it. Complete the funding agreements and begin engineering for the Stevens Creek Trail extension. I will say number 2, develop a strategy to facilitate low and moderate income home ownership, including addressing barriers to condominium development. And I will say number 8, explore placing an amendment to the city charter and a revenue measure on the 2026 ballot. And I just note that I think those were separate last year and they've been smooched together. My emphasis is on the revenue measure, not necessarily the other part, but they're combined this year. That's mine.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchner. Commissioner Silver.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always hard to, express a priority with a 1-sentence understanding of the projects. In general, I'm supportive of completing projects that we've already started, because the only way that you can tackle the whole problem of the iceberg is if you start taking things off of the underwater section. But I'm happy to see that there's a shorter list of what council is sort of adding to the mix. So that's forward progress. In my mind, number 1, the Stevens Creek Trail is a priority. We're well into that. And I believe we even have grant funding. So I think that we should definitely prioritize that so we can get it done and clarify some of the confusing issues like what some of the members of the public have raised. I will note that those cantilever trails are possible. There's a great one on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe that is spectacular. Obviously, Stevens Creek isn't Lake Tahoe, but the cantilevered sections, hopefully it wouldn't have to be too long. I also would support prioritizing number 3. That's going to make a big difference for the city's ability to deliver housing kind of naturally rather than expecting to have big development projects. And I think we should continue the work that's been underway for many years. And I will say, so, you know, as a Park and Rec Commissioner, I look at number 16, the interim pickleball plan, and I say, well, it's got the word pickleball in it, so it must be good because we're all supportive of continuing with pickleball. But I am troubled by the word interim because we're working on a feasibility study. There's, strategic plan, and I don't even understand. Are you talking about another pickleball plan in addition to the 2 that we're already doing? It just doesn't make any sense to me to not continue what we're already doing. So it's hard to tell from that, and so I'm not going to prioritize that. I think that number 10, the design standards for streamlining project development, particularly if they are to include some of what we end up with out of the urban forest and biodiversity work. I think it would be good to understand how that will apply to the private sector development, not just the city. So there's my 3 thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Summer. Mr. Bryant.
Yes, thank you. So last time we discussed this, we had or made comments, or we had a conversation about how we were going to prioritize whether just as ourselves, residents of Mountain View, as Parks and Rec commissioners. And last time there were housing issues that I thought were so critical and people who needed more support. I thought that was more critical than anything else. And so I decided to take the resident of Mountain View hat on. This time I decided to do it differently and look at the Parks and Rec Commissioner. There are things on this list that are happening that will clearly happen, that I know that council is in favor of, that the EPC will be in favor of. I decided to choose things that if we don't say it, maybe nobody else will say it. And so if I want it on the list, it's up to me to put it on the list, or at least give it 1 vote. So the number 1, the Stevens Creek Trail Extension. I was working on that in 1913 when I was on council. I was a Mountain View representative. It will happen when it happens. And I actually had lots of concerns with the other cities who were partners on this, who saw the Stevens Creek Trail as a bike commuter path. And well, I kind of tried to convince them that that's not exactly what it was. In Mountain View, this is not, for us, for me, a bike commuter path. They were very clear that this was serving the businesses. So that's, I'm not going to go for that. I think that, like Commissioner Summer was saying, establishing design standards for streamlined and improved project development. I think those should include standards for green spaces, for native plantings, for trees, for finding ways to build the housing we need while using sustainability and natural environments. And if we don't say it, it's possible that not many other people will say it. So kind of means that we need to get involved in that as a PRC and certainly as individuals. So that is one of my priorities. Number 12, develop a downtown vacant storefront window display and pop-up program. I live downtown. I'm on Castro Street once, twice a day even. And for me, Castro Street is a recreation facility for the city. It's not a street. It's not a mall. It's a place where people come to build community, to spend their time, to see the city. I mean, it's great that pickleball creates community, but Custer Street also creates community. And when the chairs are gone, there's nowhere to sit, so you can't have community. So to me, I think for the benefit of our residents, we should have a street that calls them to be on it, to sit there, to create community. So that is my second priority. My third priority is create a framework to support volunteer organizations working with the city. It is amazingly difficult to become a volunteer for the city. Volunteer organizations do not get supported. There are requirements for insurance that are putting off artists wanting to work in the city. And as a city community for all, as supporting creativity, as wanting interesting projects in the city, unless we have really solid support for volunteer organizations, we are missing out on resources. So that's my third priority.
Thank you, Commissioner Bryant. Right, Commissioner Fieldhouse, you've heard a lot of.
I have, but
So tell us what the right.
I
answers
truly,
are.
I tell you what, I appreciate the wisdom and insight of my colleagues, because you brought up some things I hadn't thought about, and then now I start wavering, you know. I came in wanting 4, and now I want 6. But I will whittle it down to the following 3. Number 1 is the Stevens Creek Trail. I see it as a way of expanding green space in Mountain View, and moving forward with our goals towards acreage of open space for our citizens. The second one is number 16, the pickleball. We got to move forward, and I think that I am also troubled by the word interim to some extent, but I think it's got to, in my opinion, we need pushing forward to serve a very large community that is in need. And then the third one, I think number 2, developing a strategy to facilitate low and moderate income home ownership. I recently talked with some of my colleagues in my other lives, or whatever the other things I do in life, and realize how I couldn't afford to live in Mountain View if I was to start over again. I'm fortunate that I've lived here for 40 years. And I can only imagine how hard it is for our teachers, our staff, our policemen and firemen, and just the workers within the city to live here on the incomes that may not provide for living here. And so I'm going to go with 1, 2, and 16, although there are some very, very good things that have been said and that are on the sheet.
Thank you, Commissioner Filios. So I applaud the outreach to advisory bodies. I share some of the process concerns, and I know it's an imperfect process. The right answers, no, my thoughts, I am wearing my PRC hat. This year I've got to wear my PRC hat more than the other hats. So I think there are many worthwhile initiatives here with a resident hat on. I'm going to go with 1, 15, and 16. The Stevens Creek Trail, important for a number of reasons. The volunteer, leveraging the potential of volunteers is Commissioner Bryant articulated, I think it's really important. I've been believing that for quite a while, that there's so much on the city plate, and there's really are a lot of resources with volunteers in the community. And I also think that's kind of that civic engagement is part of the essence of democracy. So I like 15. And then 16, I'm with the, pickleball's been on the plate. We got to just move it forward. So that's mine, 1, 15, and 16. You got them all recorded, or Do you want me to repeat anything?
I think I have them all, but I can just quickly go through and confirm that I have everyone's, if that works. So starting with Chair Davis, I have number 1, the Stevens Creek Trail Extension, number 15, the volunteer organization, number 16, pickleball.
Correct.
Commissioner Mitchner, Stevens Creek Trail Extension, number 2, low-income homeownership opportunities, and then number 8, exploring the city charter amendment and revenue measure. Commissioner Bryant, I have number 10, the design standards for streamlined development, number 12, the downtown vacant storefront window displays, and number 15, the framework for volunteer organizations. Commissioner Filios, I have number 1, the Stevens Creek Trail Extension, number 2, the low-income home ownership, and number 16, the interim pickleball plan. And then Commissioner Summer, number 1, the Stevens Creek Trail Extension, number 3, updating the R3 zoning, and number 10, the design standards. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Got everything you need?
I think so.
All right,
Thank you.
We did put a pickleball court on Castro Street.
Well, I thought that when we were speaking, if we could just use those vacant buildings. Can we have that? Can we sign them?
Very large empty restaurants. Any number.
Having dinner or.
Right now.
All right,
Commissioner Davis,
Exactly.
Commissioner Davis, before you move on, can I just make a general comment on that item?
Yes, the chair is recognizing Director Marchand.
So for members of the public, those of you that had an interest in the dark skies ordinance, I just want to let you know that that project will be running out of the community development department, and they have identified a project manager to start the work on that project.
Thank you.
All right, now we're moving to item 5.2, the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan, Parkland Level of Service. And this will be presented by Assistant Director. She's buckled in there.
Good evening. Give me one moment.
All right.
We got to do the shuffle, got to do the reset, got to get all back into our spots. One.
When you're getting buckled in, Allison, how many cards do you have on this?
This one. I have two.
If there's anyone else wishing to speak on this item, would you please fill out a card and Allison?
All right. Well, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Christine Crosby, Assistant Community Services Director and Project Lead for the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan. Here with me virtually tonight to co-present this item is founder and CEO of Next Practice Partners, Nilay Bhatt. Hello, Nilay, good to see you. He and his company is our consultant for the strategic plan. This evening, we are here to share information on the draft parkland level of service that will be included within the strategic plan. This is an informational item, and staff will be available to answer questions following the presentation. And similar to the last item, I will be taking notes of each individual's comments related to the item. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues on this level of service. Those include Community Services Director John Marchand, Assistant Community Services Director Brenda Sylvia, Parks and Open Space Manager Tim Youngberg, Recreation Manager Colin James, Shoreline Manager Brady Rebush, Senior Management Analyst Lindsay Wong, GIS Analyst Joe Lettieri, and many more that help support the development and review of this document. As noted previously tonight, Nilay and I will provide an informational presentation on level of service for parkland and amenities, the process that we took to develop it, and the commission will provide comments specifically on how school sites and shoreline at Mountain View are recommended to be calculated.
And this item does not require a motion, as I will be just taking comments tonight. So just where have we been? The city adopted a recreation plan in 2008 to review and assess recreation programs and services and facilities. This plan included 23 recommendations for those programs and services. The plan was a 10-year plan, which sunsetted in 2018 and was mostly done internal. The Parks and Open Space Plan was last updated in 2014 and included a review of open space resources within the city, calculating total open space and amenities available to the community, and offered a long-range vision to guide decisions to advance parks and open space resources and environmental conservation efforts. This plan was anticipated to be updated in 2019. In June 2021, the City Council adopted a capital improvement project to develop this Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan. Due to the pandemic and staffing transitions at that time within our department, the plan process did not begin until September 2022 when the scope of work was determined. In fiscal year 23-25's council work plan, Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan was identified as a priority A project. There was comments this evening on the earlier item of continuing the projects that are still in place, and I want to provide confirmation that the project is still moving forward and is still a priority for our department. It is also mentioned within the housing element as program 1.8, which was slated to be completed by December of 2024. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Nile.
Thank you, Christine. Obviously, we've met a few times before and spoken about this. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but just the idea behind what the strategic plan is, and importantly enough, also what it is not. It is a living, breathing document and a roadmap. It is very much driven by community input and the combination of recommended practices, trends, etc. as well. Will continue to update and evolve. And it is meant to be a department and a city-wide plan, not a site-specific plan as well. So it is the long-term vision, and it is meant to be a living, breathing document. As you'll see on the next slide, this is just a quick highlight of pretty much the entire element of the plan itself, what the final strategic plan will have, with a quick recap as an exec summary, a profile of the community, where it is, where it's going, all the needs and things that we've heard across the various public input engagement opportunities, inventory and the analysis, which is some of what we're going to be showing today, visioning work, the funding and budget considerations, the capital improvement plan, and the eventual action plan, all of which will then be packaged together in one report that in the coming months, and Christine will talk to the next steps, will be shared with the staff and then with you as well. So with that, Christine, back to you.
Thank you, Nile. So we began the strategic plan process in August 2023 with a kickoff of the public input phase. The public input phase recently was a while ago, I guess, but concluded in July 2024. During this phase, the project team presented to the PRC 3 times, and this evening will be the 4th time that we're presenting on the strategic plan. Just a recap and reminder of what we did share with the PRC in the past. In September 2023, which was the first touch point with the PRC, we presented to the commission and received responses to 3 key questions. What are the strengths that the plan can build upon? What are opportunities for expansion, improvement, or new additions? And what is your one top priority outcome? Following that meeting, we returned in December 2023 to share initial findings with site and program assessments, as well as discuss the statistically valid survey that was later implemented. And our last touch point was in July 2024 when we presented the findings from the totality of the public input process, and again, the site and program assessments. Our timeline to complete the draft plan has been expanded over time. As you may recall, we were trying to get this completed by December 2024. However, to get this right, we had additional time spent in the public input phase, and we've been completing a thorough and very in-depth review of our park and amenity inventory. This is a quick snapshot as a reminder of what the public input we received over the 11-month public input phase. Excuse me. We had over, 3,200 engagements through survey responses, interactions at our 3 pop-ups, 6 public meetings, various stakeholder and key leader meetings, and interactions on the project website. We received a lot of great input through this process, which is being used for this evening's discussion. We're also very proud of the efforts that we did to obtain the public input from our residents, as well as offering these opportunities in multiple languages. Neely. You're on mute, Neely.
Yep. Thank you. And that brings us to really the focus for today with the levels of service. And this is very specifically focused on what the community has access to across the city and some other service providers, as you will see. Certainly looks at what kind of park needs are met or unmet. And for this particular piece alone, it's looking at quantity. The other elements of the plan that will combine to eventually make up the future recommendations, one of them would be the assessments itself that look at the conditions and the quality. And the other, which is an outcome of the level of service, is the service area and the equity maps, which show access itself. Those are not things we're looking at today. Today, specifically, as Christine mentioned, focused on the level of service, but know that those are other elements that will be triangulated in order to create the recommendations that ultimately come out of this as well. Like we said all along, there is no one single source. There is no one single data point that drives all recommendations. It is a culmination of a number of different things that are brought together to ultimately come up with what we will recommend. So as you see on the next slide as well, Christine, if you want to speak to this too.
Yes, thank you. So the level of service process, which if I use the acronym LOS, I'm meaning level of service. I'm going to try to spell it out though. The process began initially at the time of the site assessments conducted in fall 2023 by the project team. During those assessments, each of our 45 parks were assessed and amenities were inventoried, and that data became the starting point of the level of service. The task for the level of service for staff was provided to us in May 2024, and we were asked to confirm the inventory and verify the acreage, the addresses, the site amenities, miles of trails, etc., that make up the quantitative data of this level of service. As you can imagine, this was no easy task, and to ensure that the data is recorded accurately, staff worked with GIS staff within the city to verify all sites that the Community Services Department maintains, which includes parks, landscape sites, plazas, trails, gardens, and much more. This verification process also included using information from the county assessor's office and remeasuring all acreage for these sites. Staff is unaware of when this was last done and wanted to ensure that there was good data from the start. And so we took this task on. And as I mentioned, remeasuring all of our sites would take a lot of time. And in fact, there were approximately 75 sites that staff had to confirm and remeasure. Through this process, staff developed a mapping tool to record the site boundaries, amenities, and acreage. As previously, this information was not all available in one single digital source. In time, staff will explore the opportunity to make this publicly accessible, but at this point, it's become a good resource for staff to refer to. Once all sites were inventoried, the project team discussed what is counted, not counted in our inventory, and how it may relate to the parkland dedication ordinance. And for the purposes of tonight's item, we will not be discussing the parkland dedication ordinance. The ordinance is currently being looked at through 3 different lenses on parallel tracks. One will be through the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan. A second is through a nexus study that the city will be conducting soon. And a third is to look at basic code cleanup for the ordinance. So what were some of our discoveries when we remeasured our sites? Well, we learned that some historical site calculations were not updated over the years as sites changed, or when remeasured, the site acreage was slightly above or less than what was previously reported. Some examples of some of the discoveries were we had inaccurate current acreage numbers for school sites due to changes that have occurred over the years with school site expansion impacting what was previously grass. A very good example of this was Vargas Elementary School, which was previously recorded as Slater School Field at 3.39 acres. Due to the changes of the site and having a new school there, the new field is much less at 1.58 acres. That's a good example of how something decreased. Additionally, during this time, the city and the Mountain View Wisdom School District signed a new joint use agreement last year This agreement included maps for each site to delineate what the city was responsible for maintaining. When we updated the school acreage, we made sure to use the acreage of the areas that the city maintains only and not to include any parts of the school campus. This resulted in some sites having less acreage than what was previously reported. We also had a lot of sites that our department maintains that was not listed in our full inventory previously. This was our opportunity to capture them so that we have a full picture of the true number of acres that we maintain, which will lead to maintenance and staffing standards following the level of service process. Another piece of this process was reviewing park classifications. Previously, Chapter 41 of the Mountain View City Code, which is the park and lieu fees, categorized parks as mini parks, neighborhood park, community park and/or recreation facility, and Stevens Creek Trail. Our goal was to be able to assign each of the parks and sites that we maintain to a classification. However, not all of them fit within those classifications. And so we went through the process of developing what those could look like. And the definitions of each of these classifications on the screen are within the report. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but on the screen is a snapshot of the classifications, the service area in which it serves, and the desirable size of the site. To provide some context of what those may be, I'm going to provide you some examples. So a recent mini park that we opened, Mora Park. A neighborhood park, Pyramid Park. For a community park, Ringstorf Park. We have one regional park. I think it's pretty easy for all of us to know which one that is, Shoreline. Trails, an example of that, Stevens Creek Trail. Passive open space. The landscape sites along Shoreline Boulevard that are more just trees and just empty. There's no program space there. That's an example of a passive open space. A special use park acre. An example of that is right outside our window here is the Civic Center Plaza. It is a space that our department maintains as well as programs. And then recreation facilities, the community center. Now I'd like to transition to talking about how we intend to calculate the school sites. Through the public input phase for both the strategic plan and when the city and district were working towards the joint use agreement, we heard mixed thoughts on how school sites should count toward the city's parkland goal. Some stated that the park that is closest to their house is a school field and it matters to them, and that is their park. Others stated these fields are not available during typical park hours, so why should they be counted at all towards our parkland goals, or they should not be counted at the full 100%. So we heard this feedback and we thought, how could we approach this and come up with a defensible way to calculate school sites? So we thought, let's go through the exercise and see what it would take if we could figure out, on average, how many hours a year a city park is available to the public versus a school site of similar attributes. We took into account each site's hours of access, number of school days, and whether there were lights or not available at that site. For example, elementary school sites are available on weekdays beginning at 4 p.m., while middle school sites are available beginning at 5 p.m. on weekdays. Or another example, Crittenden has lights allowing for more evening use of that site compared to others. We also took in the daunting task of accounting daylight savings, as city parks are generally available from 6 a.m. to half hour past sunset, which changes throughout the year. So you can imagine the amount of level of detail that we went through to come up with that. And so on here, this is the same chart from the memo, but once we tabulated all the hours, we were able to compare the annual access of school sites to the public to city sites and came up with the proposed percentages that are on the screen. For grass fields without lights, plus Vargas, which is a synthetic field without lights, we found that the school was accessible to the general public for approximately 29 hours annually. Graham Middle School, 2,700 hours. Crittenden was available more hours due to having lights for evening activity at 3,800 hours. We then compared these against the average number of hours a city site of similar attributes is available, as you can see on the slide. This then provided us with a percentage that each site was available to the public on an annual basis. I would like to point out that both Cooper and Wisman parks are made of 2 parcels, 1 city and 1 district, and that combine to make a park that is available during normal park hours, which is why we are continuing to recommend counting them at 100%. So what do these percentages mean? If we apply these to a school site, we would only count, for example, 61% of the total acres available at Bub School Field toward the city's parkland goal. For example, that 1 acre of school field in that would be 0.61 acres of parkland. We know the true acreage for each site, which we do need for our maintenance and staffing standards, but these reduced numbers respond to the access the public has at each site on average during a year during non-school hours. The second item tonight that we wanted to bring to the commission is the approach on calculating shoreline at Mountain View, or I may call it a shoreline park. Similar to the school sites, we heard through the public input process feedback on Shoreline Park and how it relates to our parkland goals. Shoreline is over 750 acres of land, and historically, we have reported our citywide parkland with shoreline acres and without shoreline acres. We heard from the public that it's great that we have this regional park within our park inventory. However, there are aspects of shoreline that are either not accessible to the general public or you have to pay a fee to use it, such as shoreline golf links or shoreline lake. In addition, for residents within the North Bay Shore area, Shoreline and Charleston parks are the closest parks for them to enjoy. We also heard from a large number of our residents how much shoreline means to them and how often they visit the park for their recreation and leisure needs. Considering this feedback, we looked at how we could count some of shoreline toward the citywide parkland goal to move away from reporting a with and without shoreline acres number that would resonate with the feedback that we received. So through this review, we found there are 3 classifications that Shoreline Park could be segmented into. 1, a regional park acre, areas that are accessible to the general public during normal park hours. Special use park acres, areas that are fee-based. And passive open space, areas that the public does not have access to and/or is habitat or environmentally sensitive areas. On the screen and within the staff report is this map of Shoreline Park segmented by these 3 classifications. And I apologize, it's a little small to see, but hopefully the report is a little bit easier. The green represents areas the public has access to during park hours, and these are the regional park acres at 172 acres. Examples of these are the North Shore, Vista Slope, and the athletic fields. The blue represents areas that are fee-based, such as Shoreline Golf Links and Shoreline Lake, which we were categorizing as special use acres at 282.50 acres. Lastly, the yellow represents all areas that the public does not have access to and/or is habitat or environmental sensitive areas at 335 acres of passive open space. So based on this, instead of reporting 750 plus acres of parkland towards our parkland goals, staff is recommending counting only 172 acres within the regional park classification towards this goal. Lastly, when conducting this review, shoreline staff were part of this process to ensure these segments aligned with the Shoreline Wildlife Management Plan as well as the Burrowing Owl Preservation Plan. And before I hand this over to Nile to talk about the draft recommended service levels, I did want to point out that we did notice a mathematical error on attachment 1 of the staff report that the total developed park acre numbers for city properties was not adding up correctly. And it turned out that the formula for that cell was incorrect. The number that was previously reported was 351.91, and it should have been 299.74. The numbers are correct on the screen. And again, I know it's a little small, but I will share the presentation following this meeting. And Nile, handing it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. So just going through these almost just to first sort of understand what all is in there, and there is quite a bit. As you look left to right, we see the different types of, park types, trails, outdoor, indoor amenities, following which you see the actual city inventory, the school district one, which as Christine mentioned, and I have to say I've done maybe a couple hundred of these plans across the country. In terms of being able to most accurately account for the capacity that is available, this is the most comprehensive any agency has ever done, down to literally the last hour with seasonality and all the rest by every single field type. So kudos to the entire team on that, but that's what you see with the school district column as well. The total inventory, which based on current and future estimated populations, is what we're looking at. So the current service level is based on the current population, and you can see the acres per thousand, miles, courts, square foot, sites, etc., which then gets to the recommended service levels. And the recommended service levels are a combination of a number of factors we spoke about earlier, from the public input to the trends to our operational experience to staff input to understanding the realities where you are, because there isn't a statewide, there isn't a national standard for any of these as well. That difference between the current and the recommended service levels, where there is a gap, is what shows the need that exists currently or shows that the standards are met. What you see after that, and this is also something that not many agencies do, and again, props to the staff as well for diving into this deeper, is showing the inventory that is going to be completed within the duration of this 10-year window, so that we are accounting for those right now as anticipated future. But as quickly as they come on, this is also a living, breathing tool that inventory can go from future development to current inventory, and it already accounts for the change in what might be future needs as well. So you can see how these account for the current population, and where there is other development happening based on the future population's needs, it does adjust for that as well, and then show you what is required in each area. Now, couple of things. One, as you look at these, some of these numbers may seem larger, especially with parkland and the paucity of how many are possibly available there, how expensive it is, etc. That this is meant to be done over 10 years. So it's not something that has to be done overnight. Secondly, as you look at this as well, right now, this is accounting for the fact that you have a 10-year JUA with the school district, and everything we see here for the next 10 years at least is going to be accounted for. Hence, they are factored in the way they are. So with that, as we look at it across the board from the very first meeting, we have heard loud and clear from the community that parkland of various sizes, various amenities, access distances, times, etc., was a priority. And you can see the mini parks, neighborhood and community parks, all of them are to varying degrees, but needs going forward as well. Now, Christine showed you a little bit in terms of the ordinances as well. So in terms of the different sizes where these would be and the distance they serve. For many of the others, like the open spaces or special use parks, there is no practice of recommending standards, because inherently we're looking at standards for developed park acres, or by very nature, when you say something is a special use site or park here, there isn't a standard that dictates what it is, because each one of them is unique in its own way as well. So that's where you see some of those that do have recommended service levels and others that do not. As you go through all of these as well, you see the trail corridors, the outdoor amenities as well, and then the indoor amenities. And not every single one is driven just by the survey priorities itself. 12 years ago, for the first time, and I know some of you probably heard this story, we did not even have a question in a survey, but we listened to the community, we saw the trends we were seeing around the country, and we recommended the first dedicated pickleball courts in San Diego County in Carlsbad in 2013. If we had gone by the survey, there would be no pickleball there as well. So the survey is really important, and it's not the only one, because there are things you see occasionally like skate parks that may often come lower than some of the others, but that are really high priority, or are from a trend standpoint or from a need standpoint, are things that we do recommend from a service level. On the other hand, you might find things that are very high priorities in surveys that may financially not be viable to be done as well. So just because something is here, it doesn't mean every single thing has to happen or right away as well. And ultimately, that becomes a combination of council direction, financial realities. I saw some of the action items you talked about earlier. We're looking at some revenue measures too. So it's a combination of all of those things. And this is done at a point in time. So when the survey was done, people didn't have access to now the reopened sort of pool in Rengstorff as well, or there were other things that they had in mind too. A year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if you do this, I am certain you will find different priorities and results as well. And so what you see here is a living tool, but shaped by all the input we have up to this point. So with that as well, I know this is obviously an area you do want to speak to, so I'm going to pause here as well. Or Christine, if you have anything else to add, if not,
Yeah.
then you can go to the next steps and the purpose here.
Sure. Thank you, Nile. I think the only thing I would add is that what's wonderful about this document is that we can update it in real time. So as, for example, Evelyn Park is currently under construction right now, is anticipated to open in a couple of months. When that opens, we'll be able to move it from the anticipated future park development to the mini park category under the I guess it'd be 2025 inventory, and be able to see how that changes things. Also, as Nile alluded to, we should be looking at updating this every 5 to 10 years because trends do change, and there may be something that has introduced that we didn't hear during our public input process that we may want to consider. And so it's a very responsive document that we'll be able to reference over time. So next steps, we are actively working on draft aspects of the strategic plan, and we look forward to sharing the draft with the commission in June. Our most immediate next steps associated with the plan are developing the equity maps that Nile mentioned earlier that will provide a spatial analysis of where needs are or are not being met throughout the city. The draft plan, as I mentioned, will be provided in June, and we intend to make it available on the project website for the public at least 10 days before the meeting. And in addition to this process, we just recently received the 2020 census population numbers by planning area just last week. And we'll be working on updating our parkland document that has been presented to the commission in the past, and updating it with the 2020 population numbers, as well as the updated acreage from this process. This will be able to show us how planning areas are meeting the 3 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents, or how it may not, and it will be included in the draft plan. As we have not gone through this exercise yet, we are unable to speak to this tonight as to what is or is not meeting. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we anticipate the city will start the Nexus study for the parkland impact fees this spring. And as a reminder, it's a separate process from the strategic plan. So with that, I thank you for your time this evening. The project team is majority all here to be available to answer questions. I will also, again, take note of all of the individual comments that are provided tonight, and no motion is needed to conclude the item. That, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from the commission, first of all. Jenny?
Okay, thank you. On the level of service chart, some of the current level of service items are actually lower than the recommended level of service are lower than the current level of service. And I'm sort of scratching my head. What does that mean for us to have exceeded it? You know, some of them are hugely exceeded. Like if you look at regional parks, you know, we currently have 2 acres per 1,000 and the recommendation is 1.25. So what are the consequences of that? Have we thought about that? Or is that the thinking that you'll be doing as you develop the plan?
Nile, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure thing. Again, I think in this case as well, the fact that you've exceeded that is not a reason to divest of anything, right? If you were even to have a recommended service level that is where you are currently, to match it, because you have future population growth, it will actually show that you now have a need 10 years from today, and you have no land to create another regional park over 50 acres in a single place in Mountain View. So part of that is also recognizing that as your actual population grows, the standard will actually catch up with that as well. Barring that one significant discrepancy, and again, for a population your size to have the luxury and the blessing of a shoreline is wonderful. But again, in that case, the recommended level of service standard is more meant to ensure that you are at a certain level. Because if one were to then look at adding all these as well, you'd be well over 5 acres per 1,000 too, which I don't know how realistic that is to sustain for the future as well as you go forward. So it's a great point you raise, and that's part of it.
I mean, when I look at the other categories, like if you were to take community gardens, it currently shows we have, oh man, yeah, so meets the standard. What is our waiting list for community gardens right now? Because I know we have 3 gardens and there's a massive waiting list.
There is, and thank you for the question. So the community gardens, we are approaching it as a programmatic aspect. As far as the plan goes, it is a facility, but it is a fee-based site. The wait list right now is probably around the 3-year mark. We were so successful when we opened Latham Community Garden from getting that wait list down to almost nil. And then with its prime location on shoreline and having a new garden, the interest of course went up. In fact, we have more people interested in Latham than we do at Willowgate. And as people have been leaving Willowgate, we've been actually splitting plots to make them smaller to add more people at that site. So that's just one example of how we're trying to increase the inventory within the constraints that we have. And so it is possible, and we have had conversations around the community garden and should it really be where it is on this document. And we have talked about maybe we need to move it under special use parks because it is special and it should not necessarily have a standard. And again, it's also fee-based, which aligns with some of those sites. And so that may be a change that we may make following tonight.
Yeah, and maybe even to go further, acres isn't really relevant. It's the number.
It's the number of plots, exactly.
So, okay.
Yeah,
yeah. So it's I just wanted to get that question out there. So
Thank you.
Hear about your thoughts on that. Yeah, a couple more questions. Have we? Oh, one of the things, it feels like we need something to frame how we look at this level of service. And, what this document is a vision and a strategy. And I guess I feel like I need to see the vision at the same time. And so have we prepared a vision?
So
that we could look, compare this level of service to see if we think it's heading in the direction.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the draft plan that will be provided to the commission in June will have a mission of values and goals and objectives, as we noted on the key components slide. And that is taking into consideration everything within the draft plan, as well as the action items and recommendations that will be coming from it.
So kind of sounds like what you're saying is we'll have another chance to look at this in that
Absolutely.
context and maybe mull it over. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And then my last question, we got some public input about equity mapping and some walkability analysis. Could you talk about where that fits into your process and why we haven't seen it yet?
Because it's next. We needed to confirm the level of service first and to work through some kinks. We have gone through a lot of iterations of this document because, again, we want to make it right. And every time we look at it, we go, and so we might fine tune, or again, we find a cell that the formula was wrong. And so we are extremely close following tonight's meeting to advance to that next stage. We have seen some draft equity maps, and when we went to review it, we noticed, oh, there is something that needs to be edited. Oh, that tied back to the level of service document. So that's again, going back to this and updating to clarify the different maps. And so those will be the next step. And sorry, what was the other item that you had mentioned?
Well, a look at the walkability.
Yes.
Where the site is located and where people live.
Yes.
in the service area.
And I believe that within our draft plan, there will be a reference to the 10-minute walk, which is done by the Trust for Public Lands. And it is a very responsive website that you can go in even in real time and go down to Mountain View and to see how many households have a park within a 10-minute walk. I will say that the data hasn't been updated since 2019. So any parks that have been entered into our city inventory are not on that website. But on that website, it does have various different filters that you can use, that you can see how many parks are within certain economic backgrounds. You can see just various different things. And I believe that for Mountain View, with the parks that were in there at 2019, we were at 90 or 91% had access to a park within 10 minutes. However, I want to give the caveat, and we did hear this a lot through the public input, that does not take into account transportation or corridors that may make an individual feel unsafe crossing. So for example, Rangsdorf Park is on Rangsdorf Avenue and also near Central Expressway. Does someone on one side or the other feel comfortable crossing Central Expressway? So that is a level of analysis that we have discussed incorporating of, yes, we know the 10-minute walk, but then how does that interplay with those type of corridors?
So is it correct then that when the item comes back to the PRC in June, that those, the equity mapping and this walkability analysis, that'll be part of what
Correct.
people will have available and they can provide input at that time?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks, that was my questions.
Any questions, Commissioner Mitchell?
A lot of them were covered. I mean, one of my questions was going to be about planning areas, and I was happy to hear that they are going to continue to be analyzed because, well, I'll get to my comments later on, but I was glad to hear that. And then my other thing is just a small little thing on the community gardens, notwithstanding whether the recommended service level is the right number or whether we do plots or not, just formulaically, if that's even a word, shouldn't, I mean, 0.02 is less than 0.5, and it would seem like that should be a need exists.
Yeah.
Regardless, you know, maybe the numbers are right or whatever, but just the formula, it would seem.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Anyway, that's all I have for now.
Okay, thanks.
I don't have any
I
questions.
don't
Thank
either.
you.
Okay. So with that, we'll turn to public comment, and Allison, how many do we have online?
One online.
One online? First, and then we'll turn to the open the room.
Make my presentation.
Yeah, I'm gonna,
It did.
okay, we have Mike Rogers first.
Okay. Mike, Mr. Rogers, have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes. And
Hey, Mike, are you there?
Heck, can you hear me? The unmute button just showed up a second ago.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, a few comments. Thanks for all the work on this. I participated on the public side at least 2 or 3 times. Some questions here. Mountain View was a unique leader in our region for a lot of stuff on the recreation side. We used to have a thing called the community model, which was kind of, it was a good way of describing equity 20, 25 years ago, which was providing the most diverse set of usages within a particular facility or programmatically. It also included kind of fee structures, right? And trying to make that affordable. Mountain View always had a history of greater income diversity than even our neighboring cities on the west side of the valley and Silicon Valley. So I'm interested in seeing that as the rest of this comes out beyond just the usage models of the land areas. But when we talk about the usage spaces, one thing came to mind in the comments earlier about, hey, let's put a pickleball court downtown. Pickleball can be played indoors. You could a pickleball court in one of the unused indoor spaces might be really popular downtown and actually help build Commissioner Bryant's community downtown, which I certainly feel is true. I noticed downtown Mountain Castro Street is much less populated by pedestrians these days than it has been in previous timeframes. After COVID, things are different, and other downtowns are actually more active. So I think that's something to think about outside even the recreation plan. But what got me thinking about indoor spaces. I grew up in the Chicago area in Park Forest, which was a suburb of Chicago, but we had the largest pool facility in the state. We had the largest community park with the most baseball fields and the most number of baseball programs. But we actually partnered with the schools not just to use the outdoor spaces, but we took over the recreation department for the village, basically took over the gym and a cafeteria for the largest junior high in the city and used it programmatically for 20 or 30 different programs that ran in evenings and weekends, from everything from adult basketball and volleyball leagues to ballroom dancing, dog training, all types of other things, which was very successful for a number of decades. And I wonder, when we get to that part of things, we talk about programmatically, I'd like to see more details, but also think about what are creative things we can do. When I look at the details of what we have here, so the other question I had is, what part of the strategic plan looks at the historical precedents we had in Mountain View that made us leaders in recreation? I mean, when we gave the contract to Mountain View Tennis about 20 years ago, went through like 4 RFP cycles and really finally developed a RFP that had the community model built into it, was a key part of the decision criteria versus what we might have gotten from the USTA, et cetera. But we can see Mountain View Tennis operates that facility with more diversity of programs than anything in Silicon Valley, and also has some of the widest usage. So the precedents of what we've done in Mountain View historically ought to be somehow comprehended in the plan. But also when I look in the details of what
Thank you, Mike. Your time is up.
Oh, okay. I'll supply some additional written comments on the details I saw in the usage models offline.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Next we have Rashmi.
Rashmi, please go ahead.
Yes. First, I want to thank everyone who has worked on this very hard on this plan so far. I especially appreciate the time and effort taken to collect community feedback. However, I have some strong concerns with the strategic plan's draft level of service, as it seems to stray. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Seems to stray significantly from the feedback provided by the public. For example, in the statistically significant survey, Mountain View residents state bicycle and pedestrian access and connections to parks as one of the most important amenities, and yet the level of service indicates that this need has already been met. As a biker and walker, I can tell you that this need has definitely not been met. Trees, grassy areas, and native landscaping were also identified as important amenities by the community survey, and these have been left out completely by the level of service table. On the other hand, pickleball courts and splash pads were ranked very low, 7% and 5% respectively on this community survey, and yet they were indicated as an unmet need by the level of service. Even more surprisingly, not a single survey respondent indicated that a skate park was important to them, and yet it's also listed as an existing need by the level of service. I understand that public feedback isn't the only factor to develop the levels of service, but I think it's still important that the table as a whole reflects the needs of the Mountain View community, especially when resources are being dedicated to projects and precious land is being developed, and currently it doesn't do that. I'm frustrated and disappointed by this misalignment, especially because collecting feedback from the public to inform the plan was a benchmark aspect of the plan's process. The city spent months and a lot of resources engaging the community and requesting feedback. Residents gave a lot of their time and energy providing input. To then ignore this input seems like a massive betrayal of the public's trust. So I urge the commissioners to request that staff go back and draft a level of service plan that actually reflects the needs of the city's residents. On another note, I think it's also important for the level of service assessment to include a climate resiliency component to its calculations. Climate resiliency is a strategic priority of the city and one we cannot address without our parks and green space as part of the solution. As our summers get hotter each year, we will rely more heavily on tree canopy and green spaces to protect us from the urban heat island effect and to keep our city cool. On the other hand, paved and rubber surfaces will greatly increase surrounding temperatures and make our parks unusable in the summer. It would be an enormous missed opportunity to leave out climate resiliency in the level of service calculations because providing parks and recreation spaces that become unusable for a large portion of the year defeats the whole purpose of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashmi. Appreciate your comments. And does that do it for the online?
Yes.
Okay. I'll let you tee up the blue cards that you have here. And I'll I'll remind everyone there's a 3-minute limit. Please pardon me if I cut you off at 3 minutes, but I think there's going to be a number of comments. So just in the interest of getting through the meeting tonight, we will hold everyone to about 3 minutes. So with that.
Okay, we have Albert.
Oh. Good evening, Commissioners. Glad to be talking to you again today. Okay, so yeah, this is the best plan I've seen so far. I just want to make a few suggestions and comments. Historically, I never liked the way Mountain View counted schools as part of the parks. I don't think many other cities do that. And I always felt like we were being shortchanged. So I'm glad to see that you've derated it, at least based on the access time. But I also have to think that a school field is not a park. There's no benches, there's no trees, there's no play area. I mean, there's no play equipment. And so it doesn't really qualify as a park. Sure, parks need play areas, but a school field is not a park. And so I think you need to derate it a certain amount by that. Also, I really like the way you divide Shoreline Park up. I never liked the way it was 750 acres, we got plenty of park space. I would also like to suggest that a mini park of an acre or less should not have a service area of 1 mile. An acre park should probably serve maybe 300 people or less based on the usual ratio. And that's about the size of one medium-sized apartment complex, or my neighborhood, which is about 160 houses. And that's more like a half a mile radius. I would not expect somebody to walk, half a mile just to get to a small 1 acre or less park. And it doesn't make sense to equate that to a neighborhood park in terms of influence. Finally, I recently did a comparison of Mountain View with San Mateo for other reasons. They're two cities that are very demographically close. And this is a list of all the parks in Mountain View, and this is a list of all the parks in San Mateo. Yeah, Mountain View has twice as many parks, but half of them are mini parks. In fact, Mountain View has 21 mini parks by my count. And that means the median park size in Mountain View is only 0.86 acres, the median. San Mateo has 0 mini parks. They have actually a little bit more park space per capita than we do. Their population is about 30% bigger. And so their median park size is 4.5 acres. I mean, that's a really good sized park. And so I think that, part of the strategic plan should be to place a higher priority on larger parks, because if you go to parks in Palo Alto, which are often 4 to 7 acres, it's a completely different feel than a mini park, which you can just barely play catch in it. It's one of those. A 4-acre park feels spacious. You feel like you have room to expand. You can do a lot more activities. I think the city really needs to make a priority of putting together larger parcels to make larger parks rather than making these tons of mini parks everywhere. I mean, there's popping up all over the place. And every time one comes up, I think there's another lost chance for a larger park somewhere else. I mean, I know they're gathering plots in my area, but still going to be only a mini park. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your thoughtful comments and being attentive to the time.
Okay, next we have Dan Shane.
Good evening. This kind of follows up to what this gentleman was just talking about. I see an opportunity to increase the amount of open space, parkland, through what I've heard to be called the parkland dedication process through the City of Mountain View Housing Development Review and Approval process. And if I'm wrong about that, just tell me now, but that's what I've learned. And so I've seen that in action in one particular project. And what I put before you is the possibility that, as he was saying, a 1 acre or 1.5 acre parcel dedicated by the developer to the city to maintain using taxpayers' money, okay, is not as good as a larger park. But I also put forward the idea that we could also consider urban forest. There's a lot of projects, developments on land where they have an urban forest, hundreds of trees. They have a tree barrier system that acts as a pollution barrier between a highway, a roadway, and a residential area, which is very important to protecting the public health. So right now, the city doesn't consider in their policy, which I believe is codified, urban forest or important natural resources. Why can't the city add that as a consideration to their current policies and codes? So, and that, as you can see, would then increase the number of opportunities for more open space, more urban forestry, protection, preservation, restoration, enhancement of complex natural ecosystems that we're losing very quickly. These artificial parks do not come with major complex ecosystems, wildlife habitat, and all the rest. So ecology is very important. We're not getting that with artificial parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shane.
Next, we have Amelia or
Hello again. I want to again speak a little bit about pickleball. First, I have several comments in general about this initiative. First, I really want to say I like it. I think it's a great idea to give the city a general guideline on how to dedicate public space to various activities. I've seen in previous meetings that, for example, whenever we propose to build the pickleball facilities, there will be a discussion about this will take away space from dog parks, tennis users, people who like green space, and there is no guideline to say we prefer this usage versus that usage, or we want this much space dedicated to this activity versus this much space dedicated to that other activity. So I think this framework is really useful to provide this guideline, and I'm happy that you are all working on this. In order to make this guideline effective, however, I have a question, which is how will this be used? Will this have actual teeth? Will this be used to guide decisions? And for that, I think there needs to be a high trust in the numbers that are in the spreadsheet. And for me, I see that some aspects of these number calculations have a lot of details. For example, how you compute, how much space does shoreline represent. But for others, it's really not clear at all where those numbers come from. I understand there are lots of inputs, like the demand, how much it costs to do certain activities, etc. But it's really hard to understand how each number is computed. And if I take the favorite example that I think many people will come up with is like, for example, if you take two activities, tennis and pickleball, which are very easy to compare, how do you come up with the number of one court for 5,000 residents for tennis and one court per 10,000 residents for pickleball? Like, what is the computation that you are doing? It would really increase the trust in those numbers for you to take this simple example and explain. My second comment in the 30 seconds remaining is that I did a rough back of the envelope computation myself, and I have to say the pickleball number that you came up with seems about right. Maybe I would recommend, a slightly higher level of service, but I want to say, I don't want to criticize only. So I have to say this is about right. And then finally, I really think it's important to have an update process to this. Pickleball is a very fast growing activity. It has grown 4x in the past 3 years. It's forecasted to increase even more. So updating this only every 5 or 10 years is not sufficient. And I hope you include update process in your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Jessica.
Hi, can't believe that March is here, and this snuck up on us. So thank you, staff and NPP, for your hard work. Your efforts are really seen and they really show through. I appreciate it. And thank you to all the commenters, really good insights and ideas. I have concerns about the lack of transparency in this methodology and the alignment of the proposed LOS with the community needs. Key concerns. The memo lacks adequate data and methodology details, making it really impossible to evaluate and provide feedback. What data was used to define the current and proposed LOSs? There's really limited data in the memo. How were the benchmarks set? Really doesn't share anything about that. Maybe a small paragraph or two. How were factors of time of day or usage types considered? But how did you come to these LOS recommendations? What's the secret sauce? Show me the data, please. I really don't know how we can provide recommendations without more information on this. The neighborhood analysis is missing, despite our feedback on localizing services. It's really challenging to understand the LOSs without this information. Where are our parks? We're saying we're meeting the need on things like picnic benches, but if we have enough, where are they? Are they actually meeting the need? Parkville facilities and multi-purpose use. How do fractional parks and courts get used? If they're for shared use fields, how do competing sports and leagues ensure that they have access? Do you divide access? I don't really understand how that will work with a like a fractional number of acres or basketball courts. What's like a 0.35 basketball courts? What does that mean? Walkability, transit access, equity mapping are not addressed. We know that there are upcoming reductions in school parkland areas. Is that included in this? Is it excluded? Would love to see the data on what's being counted here. And then Sandy, your comment on vision, really important, thank you. We don't know if we're aiming for best in class, financial feasibility. How do we set a recommended level of service based on, without a vision? So just, you have a tough task ahead of you. So good luck.
Next we have Jim.
Thank you very much for everyone for their hard work. I look at this and I'm kind of perplexed because I don't know how you can figure the level of service. It says in the document that it ensures that it reflects the community's needs and align with recommended practices. I would ask the staff, how did it decide that 6 a.m. is the right time to start calculating our usage? Bad news is that at 6 a.m., if you went to my park, Montaloma, it's pitch black and it ain't going to get light out till 7:15. The good news is on May 15th, the sun rises at 6 a.m. The bad news is on July 15th, it stops rising after 6 a.m. So for 2 months of the year, 6 a.m. is a good number. This goes to Jessica's comment. How did you come up with this? What did you do? It seems to me like we have an answer in search of an analysis rather than an analysis that produces an answer. Take the shoreline calculations. Ronique and Lisa did a great survey that says we're not going to count anything on the other side of 101 or Central. We don't want our children climbing fences to go over Caltrans, climb another fence, and then cross Central to go over to Rengstorff to play. How can we count it here? Why are we doing that? What I think we need as a group to come up with a very good strategic plan is, what do we must have? What do we owe our children? What do we need to do for them so they don't play video games all the time? What should we have? Whether it be tennis, pickleball, swimming pools. But if we can't give them a place to play, or a place for our seniors to walk, or a place for our low-income people to throw a ball or kick a ball in their neighborhoods, why are we wasting money on splash pads and things like that? So what do we must have? What should we have? And what would be really nice to have? Because this analysis doesn't give us any indication that the 3 months of the year that it's dark out in the school parks, what are we going to tell our dogs? Come back in 3 months and I'll take you for a walk? We can't do that. What are we going to tell the kid? Oh, you can go play in the park, but not until the end of February? We can't do that. So I'd ask the staff, where'd you come up with these numbers? Did you make them up? 6 a.m. You make it up? I guess I have 40 seconds. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Shawnee.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is about the school grounds. There is a shared use agreement, and based on that, and the land that the city is maintaining, that's how they calculated the area, if I understand correctly. However, the shared use agreement doesn't say that the schools can't build on those shared grounds. And as far as I know. So the schools, as enrollment may increase, they could decide to build on those. And then what happens, I don't know how how static those calculations are, or if a school decides to build a few more classrooms, are you gonna, what happens then? So that's just general question, because this is not city decision to build on school grounds. It's some other agency. I do think that park size matters. Parks that are smaller than 4 acres, not as useful to people. They don't create the same kind of thriving community with people doing all kinds of things at the same time. One thing about park amenities, there's a lot of discussion about trees and how important trees are, but trees don't show as amenities. A bench does, a tree doesn't. Maybe large trees need to be counted as park amenities where they exist. So, and maybe other, like if there's a butterfly garden, that's an amenity. I don't know if that goes into the calculations. And then shoreline, my favorite part. I'm a little mixed about this. I think it's good that we actually see the importance of passive natural areas, but it's not clear whether investment in those areas will continue the same way that there's investment in a golf course or investment in other more active areas. There's also, it's not clear, biology is dynamic, like sometimes the kites will nest in a very busy area and sometimes they'll go into the less busy areas. And so how do you deal with the fact that it's not static? Biology is not static. And the black skimmers, if the boats get too close, then they might leave at the island. So these kind of things, I don't know how you calculate them. But the other thing with that is I'm not sure how this calculation interacts with all the other plans. There is the boreal management plan, there is the wildlife preservation plan, the wildlife management plan. There's the ongoing development of the biodiversity and urban forest plan. So how are these things connecting together? How are you looking at all of that comprehensively? It's not clear here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Shani.
Next is Celia.
Hello, Celia Pammer again, resident of Mountain View. I 100% agree with everything Rashmi said and want to +1 that. And I might touch on some of them, but I'm going to try and hit some other things because I agree with everything she in there. First off, I was trying to go through the old meeting minutes. In the fall of 2023, I have a recollection of City Council actually
directing for the school space not to be counted as park space. I think I found that it was on September 12th, but I didn't go through the video and, you know, the minutes aren't very comprehensive. So I think I'd be a little nervous including them if city council said they don't want them included because the JUA is temporary and they didn't want us to be counting something as permanent when it's only temporary. My sort of back to the trying to figure out how the sausage was made. Why is there no target for open space acreage? I could see that maybe we don't know what that target is yet, but maybe we should reference or call out the biodiversity plan to set a target that we can try to meet. I am a little bit concerned with what Neely said about how we took all the resident surveys and had everyone take their time and then said, just kidding, we're gonna make our own numbers. Like we all gave input and we thought that that was gonna help form the numbers. And it sounds like it only kind of did, I guess. Because again, as Rashmi said, the top priorities were for trees and open space and playgrounds, and we're not seeing that in that plans of use or levels of service. Also, what about the commissioner input? They asked for a paradigm shift, but this chart looks like it could have been made a decade ago for any city. We want a paradigm shift where we're looking at multimodal use. How do we see that when we're compartmentalizing some things and shoving other things together? For instance, we count the number of people per court. If you just put basketball, pickleball, and tennis together as courts, then you're saying you need a court for every 2,000 people, but somehow only a field for every 7,500 people. But that services soccer and ultimate frisbee and cricket and like the dog off leash areas and all sorts of uses. And so it seems very pavement centric on there. There's many forms of pavement that are specified out, whereas all the things of green spaces, nature, trees that people asked for are shoved together. And so I'm not seeing the survey results in there. As a side note, some people mentioned the bikeability and walkability. I think we need to be a little more creative. I've been to the pavement budget presentation 3 times and they're saying we don't have the budget to keep all the roads paved. Maybe we have too many roads and they're too wide. Why can't we start converting some of those to parks like Paris has done? So maybe be creative. Thank you.
Next we have Bill.
Ready? Okay, thank you. I could speak for hours on this. And this is overwhelming. I want to say one thing. First of all, a lot of very wise people have spoken this evening. There's many more wise people out there. The extent that the commissioners and the staff can keep the people like this involved in this whole process, you'll come up with a much, much better project. Our product at the end. Please try to figure out ways to do it. Don't do it in a back room all by yourselves. I'm going to ad lib for a minute here. I'm looking for here in this strategic plan is generationally accessible, walkable public parks. By generational, I mean, when you're a kid, you should have a place to play at the tot lot. When you're older, you should have baseball fields, basketball courts, soccer fields, frisbee areas to run around in. When you're older, you should have places to meet friends, to walk around, enjoy the outdoors, and get out of the house, okay? Everybody should have that, okay? Look at the local park that I'm close to in Montaloma. At 6 a.m., the dog people are out there. Then the fields are closed, but the tot lots are still open, and they're used all day long. At 4 o'clock after school to 5, kids are out there playing organized sports. Then at 6 o'clock, the dog people are out again. You had in your chart 3 parks, you say 3 dog parks for all Mountain View is okay. No, at 6 o'clock, every park in Mountain View is used as a dog park. Walk around and look. When something like that comes up, I question the whole process. Real quick, next one, we have to fly through this. School fields. That's great. I don't believe we should prorate anything because during the day, school fields are closed. That means the kids, the little tiny kids and their parents can't use the tot lots. That means it's accessible 0% of the time, not 50% of the time. Okay? So they lose. Next slide. That's great. You're breaking up Shoreline Park. What I see in the plan, though, you call these hiking areas basically, forget the exact word, they're traditional public park spaces. No, they're not. They're hiking trails. Windy Hill is a hiking trail and it should be included in your hiking trails, not as a traditional park space. Really. Next slide. What scares me about this spreadsheet that you presented, it's too late, you can't do citywide parks and come up with conclusions. You have to do walkability indexes and look locally. I gave you a presentation, please post it so everybody can read it.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert.
Oh, okay, you didn't send me.
Did you,
You didn't? Oh, okay, I didn't see.
We don't have anybody else online. No more cards.
Okay, everyone that's spoken. So, at this point, we'll, get commission input and. I'm sorry? A 5-minute breather? Yes. Okay, there has been we're gonna take a couple minutes here for a breather and we'll be, resume in 5 minutes. Can I get to the, yeah.
Better go.
You better hurry.
Meeting the.
I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. Thank you folks online for indulging our break, and we will resume now. The remainder of this item will be commission comment and discussion. And what I'd like to do is actually do two passes. I'm going to make comments and then I'm going to go back through, because I think one of the real benefits for me, and I think other commissioners, is the thoughts that are stimulated by fellow commissioners. So rather than having that be a free-flowing discussion, maybe we can just do it as comments and then another set of comments to react to that. And to start off, I think we will ask Commissioner Pitchner for his elucidation.
Sure. Thanks. And I like the idea, because sometimes when you go first, it's like, oh, everybody else has, and there's good stuff I want to build on. That's a good. So anyway, so I just want to start off, I want to say that I thought the report itself, what we got tonight was sequential and pretty readable on it in terms of a difficult topic. And so I want to thank staff for all the work that went into it. But more importantly, all the work that's gone on in the background in sort of getting to this stage, because I know a lot of work has gone into that. So I have a number of comments on various aspects of the report. And I'll just not in any great order, but I will at some point touch on the two things that I think staff wanted comments on tonight. First of all, with regard to the Nexus study that was mentioned, I do think that it would be a very good step to apply the parkland dedication ordinance to commercial developments, preferably and hopefully generating an amount that at least offsets the decline in parkland funding that's going to be lost from reducing the parkland fees that are assessed to residential developments. I think that commercial properties and people who work in commercial properties also benefit from parkland and open space. And I think that that's an important way to augment parks funding. I agree that the passive use and special use are important parts to include on the inventory list. And I also concur that they should not be included in the per acre calculations for residents. I think it was great to list trail corridors and trail inventory. I think it's also informative to document inventories of courts, playgrounds, picnic tables, other amenities. And I think there were some other things that weren't on that list that some of the speakers brought up that would be good to include as well. I think that there's real value and incredible value in showing park space by planning areas. And at first I was disappointed that I thought that maybe that was going to disappear. I think it's important, but I'm assured that it won't. I think it's important to keep our eyes on parts of the city that don't have close proximity to parks. I thought one of the comments about mini parks in a 1 mile radius was an interesting one. I mean, it should maybe be less than that. That was an interesting comment. I think that maybe some of that will be covered by equity maps. I don't know exactly what an equity map will look like. But I think it's important that the acres per thousand for each planning area will continue to be tracked. It's a good thing. I think it needs to be always a visible part of the reporting, and it shouldn't just be an appendix that gets referred to as a background document. I think to get to buy-in, and there were some comments on this tonight, I think there needs to be more transparency with specifics, if possible, on how the recommended levels of service were determined. I think that the comparison of actual versus recommended is key to the entire analysis. And that recommended number can't feel arbitrary. So I think it's important to show more specifics on that, and also going forward to have a consistent and understandable narrative about the process for setting the recommended service levels. Turning to the schools, I'm fine with, I think that was a challenging task. I know there were two sides, include them, don't include them. I'm totally fine with the methodology that was used by available hours. I think that's as good as a proxy as can be made. It's in fact how I would have suggested doing it. I think that maybe there should be a footnote that school grounds are subject to an ongoing joint use agreement and aren't guaranteed forever. And make that footnote. I think the report shows that the city is still largely dependent on the joint use agreement for some of the outdoor amenities. When I went back in and did some calculations, if there were no joint use agreement, there would be a shortfall or needs exist for basketball courts and for rectangular fields, the latter of which is critical for youth sports. And I think the city would also be real close to a need exists for playgrounds if the school facilities weren't included. I like the decision to break Shoreline Park into 3 areas. I think it's a more intuitive way of categorizing that space, and I think it's an excellent way to go about it. I do have a concern with a couple of things. The first one is more minor. In fact, it's probably very minor, but Rengstorff House to me has it's not always open, and it's reservable for fees for some of the areas, and so to me some of that feels a little bit more like special use than available parkland. But that one's a little bit smaller. The larger concern I have is with fully counting Vista Slope and even more so Crittenden Hill in the regional park bucket, which adds into the developed park acres. Crittenden Hill in particular, the pathways aren't easily visible. That area is bordered by Google on one side, Crittenden Road with no parking on the second side, and it's somewhat off-limit RV parking area on the third side. When I tried to drive in there, it said parking not allowed or something like that. So the question I have is whether Mountain View residents really perceive those 2 areas, especially Crittenden Hill, as being fully open to the public. And even if so, I think that the tall grasses there really preclude any activity, even just picnicking or running around on a vast majority of the space. So, me personally, I never had the feeling that I could really freely use the entirety of those spaces, particularly going off path. So in that regard, I think that those areas for me feel like a better fit to be counted mostly, if not entirely, as passive open space. I think, again, breaking Shoreline Park into 3 areas is great. But even the remaining 172 acres that count as regional parks is a big enough number to make up almost 50% of the overall developed park area acres. And for that reason, I just think that the portions of shoreline that are counted as regional park really need to be entirely credible as being fully usable and available to the public. I'm not saying that those aren't wonderful open space areas. They totally are. But it just feels more like passive use than a developed park. One thought I had on that is that the trails could be categorized as a regional park or trails, with the other areas falling into passive use. And one other thought on those 2 areas, if Vista Slope and Crittenden are to be included as developed park space, it would be nice to publicize those more, including wayfinding for trail entrances and for where parking for cars and bikes can be done. So those are sort of my initial set of remarks. I think that it's really interesting data. I think it provides a novel and more comprehensive way of looking at how we count it's accounting. I think tonight is, my understanding is this was sort of a counting exercise tonight. And so I think that it's an interesting way to look at how we count open space and amenities. And you know, I'll throw it out there again. It's not for tonight, but I'm really looking forward still to suggestions that this plan is going to have for how to fund and acquire additional parkland, because that's going to be an ongoing need. Those are my initial thoughts. Where to go next?
Yes, sure, thank you. I really like all that you said, Commissioner Mitchner. And, you know, I first want to note that this is really just the beginning. This is our first view of what's been going on. And I'm glad we're getting a preview now, and I don't expect it all to be done and perfect. There's always this struggle tension between, you know, seeing the whole package and, you know, starting somewhere. And I think it's good to start somewhere. And thank you for that. The inventory that staff produced is just incredible. You know, really want to call out how appreciative I am of the work and thought that went into that. You know, it's clear that staff's almost like, you know, kind of like wants to take a breather and just like, oh my God, we did it. We counted it all. We figured out what we have. I mean, that's a huge task, and we really, I don't want to like go past that before, you know, appreciating it. I think that, you know, so the next piece we're getting, other than the inventory, is this level of service concept. And so just, you know, turning to what that is and what we're doing with it, that is not the strategic plan. That's just one part of the strategic plan. And, you know, I'm looking in the staff, trying to find the words in the staff report. Level of service refers to the measurable standards used to evaluate the quantity and service levels of park and rec facilities in the community. Okay, so it's about quantity. It's not about quality or any other aspect. And so that kind of, you know, I made the comment about the vision, or maybe we'll just have a mission earlier. To me, we're, you know, you have a mission, you have a customer. We haven't really begun to talk about some of those aspects. For example, I think one of our speakers kind of brought up this idea of, you know, generational use of a park, and that really goes to the different layers of uses that happen over time, over the seasons. And I think that customer frame can really help you understand it. For example, the school fields, the customer tends to be youth sports. That's how those are used outside of school, other than informal uses. I guess that's a customer too. One speaker mentioned that the school parks, another customer are the dog walkers. And so I do think it's important to have this kind of quantitative measure, but we also need to be looking at what the customer is and what the needs are being met. And so the thing about the level of service chart, it makes you think that all that really matters is acres. But that isn't really the case. The mission will describe what parks are for. And so if we're looking for matrices or dashboarding or any of that, acres is one piece, but it's not the only piece. So hopefully we're going to be keeping that in mind as the plan is developed a little bit further, because we don't just want acres, we want all the good stuff. We want the sense of community, we want kids to be able to play, a lot of things that people talked about. And I think that is one aspect of, I don't know if I were to attribute some of the reactions I'm hearing, it's because it's just like so tabular and technical and gridded. It doesn't capture any of the kind of like vitality and such of parks. And so I was starting to think about, you the R3 zoning update. And one of the pieces that they did early on was, and I suppose we did that in the Park and Rec strategic plan as well, but to kind of produce prototypes of what each piece that we're looking for is. It's almost like a little, in the R3, they use sketches and they had photographs. And I think, if you took that customer frame and you said, all right, a customer is, tots, and here's how we serve them. Our customer is, dog walkers, here how we serve them. We have dog parks, but we also have these other multi-use parks, right? Like, think about it in terms of the customer. So to me, the LOS chart is just one element of how we evaluate how we're doing on our parks. And it's going to be dynamic, and as staff described, it will be updated over time. For example, if heaven forbid, we're not renewing the agreement with MPWSD on the shared use of school facilities, then that would force us to reckon with that at that time, and we don't need to pre-reckon with it. I think given that we're moving to a new process that will be more dynamic, we will have an opportunity to see it coming and address it. But through that, we can see that we're actually meeting, what, state level service in the Quimby Act for 3 acres, 1,000 over citywide, and then hopefully we'll start to see how that lays out in terms of neighborhoods and equity. Thinking about the I'm blanking out on the term, service area for really all the parks. So one aspect of, so the service area is intended to help you understand the spatial distribution in the city. So let's say if a mini park is service area, its service area is 1 mile, then there would be a mini park every mile within the city. That's kind of how that would unfold. Or you could, I do sort of agree that maybe a mini park service area would tend to be smaller, given that the customer is going to be mostly the younger kids and someone doing an informal activities, throwing a frisbee, things that they tend to be for smaller kids. You want to be able to let kids go out the door and not be afraid that they're going to get run over on El Camino. So yeah, maybe shrinking that service area on many parks would be good. However, I don't conceive of a system where there'd be a mini park every half mile. So I don't know, it's just something that I would like to see the thought process behind the service area a little bit more. I like what Commissioner Mitchell said about shoreline. And I do like some of the thinking that went into dividing it up and doing it. But it's almost like we're missing one of the park use types, prototypes, which would be more of that kind of walking, and it's not really a trail, the Vista Slope, the Crittenden Hill piece that aren't really developed parks. I know that, like, even if you were to look at it from a maintenance level, it's quite different. There's, not a bunch of tree trimming and mowing. It's mostly like an annual weed whack and maybe some pavement maintenance. So I don't know how to define that, but feels like there might be another category worth identifying. And then finally to the school calculations. I really like how staff did it, divided that, or discounted based on the hours that it's available to the public. And it's definitely a defensible methodology. It feels like to me, like if council thought about this, I forget what year was mentioned. It was a while ago, and it's worth them reconsidering a different methodology now, given that we have a better inventory and we have a good approach being proposed. And that said, those school sites definitely serve a different customer, and that's why, to me, that concept of customer is useful. And which is not to say it's not worth serving that customer, that being, youth sports groups and informal play, but it's still a different customer than, say, a developed city park with a lot more facilities and programming. I think I'll continue to think about things and look forward to my second round.
Mr. Bright.
Yes, thank you. So I have comments on two levels. I will start with the question that we're being asked today about the level of service. And like the rest of my fellow commissioners, I very much appreciate the work and the amount of work and the detail and the cooperation between different teams on staff to put together spreadsheets so that we know exactly what open space and recreation facilities we have. I know you're proud of it as a result of a lot of time and hard work, and it's completely something we need to have. I'm glad we have it now. I'm really surprised we didn't have it before. I assume you're surprised too. Hallelujah, we have it now. And obviously it needs to be a living document and it needs to be updated and not. If it's a living document and it's digitalized, we can update it all the time. Every time we open a park, every time the school district adds more classrooms, it can be a living document. Okay, so that is great. I also, there've been any number of comments about how you calculated the use of the school fields. It seemed okay to me, although it certainly doesn't seem like the community gets much use out of them. Most of the day, there's organized sports there. 6 o'clock in the morning is not my favorite time to take out the dog, but I really appreciated the very detailed explanation of how you got to those numbers. Maybe it's not the perfect solution, but it was clear, it was transparent, and I could follow it. That was great. I had a lot more trouble with the new park categories. And to me, it seems that the new categories, and in fact, the categories we're using have so many unspoken biases in them that we haven't looked at, we haven't discussed. Celia reminded me that I said months ago, years ago, that we wanted a new paradigm to look at how we provide parks and recreation in the city. And here we have really the old categories. So for me, the separation between active use and passive use, I find it enraging. In our culture, active is always a positive word. It's the highest use, it's wonderful, it's energetic, it's active. Passive is really pretty pathetic. It could be used in a better way. And here are the spaces that I find most important in terms of sustainability, in terms of breathing, in terms of quality of life, are passive spaces. So maybe we could put a few paved courts on them and they would become active. Wonderful. We have made a step forward towards being active people. So I know, I Googled the term passive open space and I saw that a lot of agencies use it. I thought, maybe somebody doesn't use it. Maybe there was a brilliant idea I can bring to staff. I couldn't bring a brilliant idea to staff. I didn't have enough time to think about it. I find the term passive open space sends a message, which is not the message we want to send. Protecting wildlife, doing sustainability matter, doing, advancing the city's sustainability goals. That's not passive. That's actually very active. It's a lot more passive to build a few more paved courts. So I have a really, obviously, a really negative response to this. And the public has been telling us very clearly that we want more trees, we want more wildlife, we want more spaces in which to be, in which to breathe, in which to cool off. And we're saying, yeah, fine, passive. Instead, on the list, on the level of service, I see splash pads. I guess that's active because the water is active or the children jump. I don't know what the implications of cutting up shoreline into different categories applies. And I asked a question of staff about whether a wildlife biologist had looked at it, and the answer was that the shoreline manager had looked at it. And to me, it sounds like doing the minimum required, which has on the whole been what we've been doing in shoreline lately. Shoreline is an area that we all love, that we all talk about, that Mountain View has Shoreline Park, but we're not doing as much as we could with Shoreline Park. Now we describe regional parks as providing wildlife habitat features, but wildlife habitat features can be provided in much smaller parks. The chance that we will get another regional park are zero. Okay, our ability to enhance nature in the city is significant. San Francisco is doing it. Other cities are doing it, but we are saying wildlife habitat that's fine in the regional park. We can do it in a small park. We can have a pollinator corridor. We can have small wildlife areas in our small parks. Trails. The trail definition is for inter-community usage. So I live close to the Stevens Creek Trail, and for me, the trail is going from one neighborhood in Mountain View to the other, taking my dog for a walk, just going around the neighborhood once. That is for use in the community. It's not a commuter trail to Palo Alto and Sunnyvale. So that definition also does not reflect usage in Mountain View. All right. My main, and this other commissioners have said, how are these standards defined? Okay, we're being offered recommendations by on the spreadsheet itself, recommendations for levels of service. Have we discussed those levels of service? No, we haven't. We're being presented recommendations for more pickleball courts and splash pads. And our residents have spoken clearly about more open space and more trees. This is not something that should be brought to us as a finished product. Okay, that my fellow commissioners, there has been a lot of input from the community. And we have given input. And I've gone to several meetings. I've gotten several amounts of input. But working together isn't giving input. Working together is crafting tools, crafting recommendations, discussing them, making changes, discussing them again. It's a slow process. When we started this process, history at this point, we were all pretty clear about the fact that we didn't want to be presented with the finished product. You know what? It's March now. In June, we are going to be presented with the finished product. And we will say, oh, that's not what we think the community said. And the answer will be, well, you have, give us some edits, but the work has been done. And council is expecting it in November. And so we have the finished product, which is exactly what we said we didn't want to have. So I've been in public service and on nonprofit organizations for decades, God help me. And I've participated in any number of strategic plans. And they usually followed a procedure. We discussed our vision and our goals, and then tried to figure out what the future looked like. And then we came up with, from the goals, we moved on to recommendations. But we didn't do the recommendations before we did the goals or the vision. In June, we're going to be presented with the vision and the goals and recommendations. And there will be time for the commissioners and the public to make comments. But the product will have been finished. Minor edits, I'm sure, will still be possible, but the plan is done. That is not the way that one makes strategic plans. And it's not like this has suddenly occurred to me. We all spoke about it months ago, years ago. So, there are issues that I want to see in a strategic plan. But mainly, I want us to discuss our vision for what recreation and parks look like in Mountain View. Now, there is a tension between organized fields and sports and passive spaces, between certain organized groups who want a certain activity and other not organized groups who want to be able to walk in open spaces, not to drive to open spaces up in the hills. There are tensions between people who want to have plastic grass on everything so they can play all the time, and people who think that we should not be using plastic grass. There are tensions between people who want dedicated spaces and people who want multi-use public spaces. There are a lot of things to discuss before we start making recommendations about how many parks we should have. We need to know what kind of parks we want. Some people want mini parks. I love mini parks. I think my mini park, Mercy Bush, has a huge diversity of people at all times. It's a wonderful community builder. Other people don't like them. Other people think we can find ourselves regional parks. The bottom line, this process is not the process I was expecting. To me, we cannot give our input to staff today and say, we'll see you in June. I'm glad that there will be 30 minutes, an hour for public input, and then the commission can say something too. To me, the only way to move forward is a lot more meetings between now and September, if that's the time frame we have. We need to talk about the vision. We need to talk about the goals. We need to define what those are. The community needs to think about it. We need to give input to staff. Then there needs to be another meeting where we hear what they have managed to put together from the vision and the goals. Then we move to recommendations. Then we figure out how to move forward. What we have today, I mean, the level of service, these are all operational tools, which we need, but these are tools. The vision and the goals, that hasn't happened, and that's what the strategic plan is about. I actually incredibly still have things to say, but I'll stop now. But I feel very strongly about this, that this is not the strategic plan I expected. This is not the strategic plan. We haven't gotten there. I'll shut up for a while.
Mr. Felios.
I'd like to, it's important to thank from all of us, and thank you for all the detail that went into it. I think the thing I enjoyed or appreciated is a better word, the most was the coordination between different departments. My experience, and maybe just my perception over the years, has been that there hasn't been a lot of cooperation amongst departments in Mountain View. And I thought that this was a great example of, and maybe something we're moving forward with in other aspects of parks and recreation and development within the city. We continue to develop this type of relationship between the departments. So I compliment you on that. So a lot of other things I'm not gonna, it is a commentary, but some of the comments I was gonna make have already been made, so it doesn't need to be made again. But I do like just the way the school properties were counted and the shoreline, although I could agree with that. We could look at shoreline in greater depth with regards to how it's counted. But I do think that there are certain areas there, the wildlife areas that we are not, how should I say, that we want to leave to the wildlife should not be counted. That's theirs. And we got to treasure the fact that we have that, but it's not part of what I would consider the acreage we want. The only thing I'm going to add is what my vision with regards to this document I saw, and Renee just said it, is a tool. It is not the plan. And it is, and so I looked at it as such, and even the column that meets standards or needs exist, that's all relative. I mean, I think that I want to see the plan, and the plan is going to include the public input. And the public input, I don't think this matters a lot to me personally, where the needs, it's just a tool saying that compared to other cities, compared to national standards, needs exist, or that we have enough. And as far as the splash pads, I mean, if we have zero, we have zero. It doesn't matter. I mean, if that's something we value in Mountain View, the red area that says needs exist in splash pads, we just ignore it. Or the fact that in my opinion, I think I'm glad that the dog parks, it says needs exist. I think that we have a large dog population in Mountain View that need more space. And I think that we've got to find a way to do that. So again, I see it just as a tool and not the final document. And I look forward to the document, including and allowing us the input to go ahead and say, if the final document doesn't, I won't say completely, but doesn't reflect what the public has said over the last year and a half, I believe it's a year and a half now, then we have to stop and say, hold on, wait a second. That's not, not what the general trends of our city is saying. I do think that it will, you know, I look forward to, again, reading it, and it may not be the final piece that we want to forward to council. So June 25th to me is not a deadline. And again, it's just me. It's not a deadline. It's a chance to see a document that puts together some of the level of service calculations, puts together the public input, puts together a little bit of history, and puts together how we maximize multi-use throughout the city, and includes, as almost all of you said, neighborhoods. The fact that, you know, just like when we talk about trees, where we have plentiful trees in one part of Mountain View, other parts of Mountain View have 0 trees. And that's, we've always looked at it from that standpoint of how can we address those needs. And that's what I look forward to in the report, as well as where are the needs, and where can we go ahead and recommend to council that we channel future funding over the next whatever number of years. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
I think there's so much to appreciate here. One, the public comment is really appreciated, and believe me, the commission hears it, and it's very important. I also appreciate the staff listening to it all and really considering it, because I know half of the things you're hearing, you just want to respond to because you know there is an answer that you have. So it's a tough job you have, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate the complexity of this endeavor. There are so many dimensions to this. You know, the Quimby Act is not a recommendation for 3 acres per thousand. The Quimby Act, as I understand it, I could be wrong here, but is a limitation on what developer fees can be extracted, with the 3 acres per thousand being the maximum. So it's not really an aspirational thing, it's a limit. So, you know, we've got the Quimby Act, we've got the whole issue with the complex dynamic with the school district and the collaboration there. We've got the dynamic that a significant part of this plan is frankly geared towards managing operations and the inventory and the resources and the complexity of running a park system. And then there's the multitude of community values, both the quantitative aspects of what we want in our community, and then the resources, you know, what are the numbers here? Layer into that the ambitions of the city are biodiversity and environmental and sustainability ambitions, and our transportation and pedestrian bicycle ambitions. So there is so much going on here that I appreciate all the work that's going into it. What I really appreciate, and I think the staff request tonight is to address the calculations for shoreline in the school district. And I truly appreciate this attention to data precision and accuracy. And it will serve you for a long time. And it's something that can be maintained. And you know, as Tim was telling me that, every amenity and asset will eventually be documented, and we really know how to manage the system. So we can argue about school space and how much, but I think now we've got relative transparency and a methodology that is defensible. So we can still argue about what's right or wrong, but we've got the data to do that with. And I think that's really important. I think the transparency is important. So having said that, the data and the clear definitions are essential. They're the foundation, but they are not a strategy. And I agree with what Anita said, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reiterating it. I do wonder if we had really confronted the questions of goals and missions up front and kind of processed that, how that might have affected how we looked at the categories. And for that matter, the 3 acres per thousand, you know, even if we might have filtered some of the standards, there's these standards, but do those really apply to us, against these goals? Maybe not. So I really agree that, I think what we've been asked to comment on is the calculations. I think that's splendid, and I think you've done a great job. And I also agree that now we really have to compare that, hold that up to the goals and mission, which we have not yet identified explicitly. In your process listing there, we're down to 4. We've got the numbers, and now we're gonna do the goal setting. So I know that staff wants to expedite the process, and we're running behind, and there's this tension between getting all the parties' input and having a product, and that's tough to manage. So I'm all on board with the school calculations. I had a couple days ago presented to staff some thoughts about the categories, and actually the numbers were a little out of whack. I think shoreline should be a little more obvious in this presentation of numbers. I think the 3 categories are okay. I wonder if we want maybe a environmental category. Commissioner Bryant doesn't like the nomenclature of passive and active. I'm okay with that. Maybe I'm a pacifist or something. But I think what it's really getting to is accessible and non-accessible. And then there's this issue of preservation or biologically important or environmentally important. And somehow that's not captured in the categories, although it's clearly a community priority and council priorities and biodiversity and many other things. So it would be nice to see that better integrated. But great job on developing a pretty complex way to account for the school sites. I think it's fine. I think anyone that looks at it can understand how the numbers were derived and can argue them, but at least they're there. And I would probably present shoreline a little differently, but I think the general accounting is good and move forward. So with that, we'll take a 30-second breather break, and then we'll do just a quick pass again, because maybe we've heard things from other commissioners. And then we'll try to wrap this up in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll just a few comments based on some of the things I've heard. So I would say that I had also envisioned a more hands-on, participatory, iterative process. And to the extent that that hasn't happened, I think that there may be some reasons. I don't, staff might be able to elaborate on it. But I'm disappointed that we weren't able to, at least to date. But it seems like the timeline is getting scrunched to the end, and so I don't know that that's how that's going to happen. But I had envisioned that we would be much more involved in a lot of the steps of this. That's one thing. If there's any ambiguity, I love passive space. I love active space. I love passive space. For me personally, there's no negative connotation to the term passive space. I mean, and that may not be true for everybody, but I love passive space. I think tonight, I think that there's been some confusion on, what we're seeing tonight. I mean, and confusion maybe a little for us and also for the public, I think, on what we're seeing tonight, how that fits into the end product. And so I think it might be helpful before June, to have a framework of, what we're going to see and when we're gonna see it and how it ties together. And to the extent that we can participate more in that process, I think that that would be a positive. And that's it for my.
Thank you, Commissioner Mister. Mr. Summer, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna be 30 seconds, but I'll try.
I didn't say 30 seconds.
Okay, all right.
But I do have a gavel.
Just directed at that, not at her.
So I will say that it has been clear from the very first time this came to me to the commission, to me, that this was going to be a staff and consultant driven plan. The work scope for this came to us. We had our chance to comment. Next Practice Partners was hired and they went down this path. Community-driven planning does not look like the process we've been doing, and I don't say this with offense, but Mountain View has never done community-driven planning. It's a whole different thing. It takes a long time and a lot of patience. Wouldn't just be 5 people as your advisory committee, you'd have more like 30. It's like a giant sausage factory where every step is debated. And it's a good product, what we're getting. But one of the challenges of a staff and consultant driven plan is how to create buy-in when you get to this exact stage of the planning process. Because people go, wait, what about this? What about that? I don't understand how you did it. Where's the transparency? And so the way we're headed is the next step is going to be the release of 500-page document with appendices. And then everybody will say, we don't have time to review all that. So the challenge is how to create buy-in. And I'm not here to bring the answer up. I just do think that that is something to really seriously think about. And the council's gonna have the same problem that we are, I foresee. New topic. So active and passive, I agree, are not good terms. Park planning has moved beyond active and passive. One way to look at it is intensity. You have low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity. You might also have a category like environmental priority. You know, when MidPen talks about open space, they talk about low intensity open space, and they have a sense of what that is. They don't do medium and high intensity. That's up to the county park system. That's what Joe does. So I suggest we move away from passive and active. And then we really need to define what we mean by that, and not just with words, but with pictures. And so I think, you know, low intensity would be a great way to describe the Vista Slope and Crittenden Hill. You know, it does have, you know, facilities to it, but it doesn't have, you know, running around kids and screaming and a lot of intensive living in parks. And so, you know, whether that means we need to chop the, you know, acres differently, I don't know, but so the other thing that I like about that concept is it does capture the kind of multi-benefit spaces, the layered of uses, and that's one aspect of kind of this binary active passive that we don't really capture very well. So in a more intensively used space would be more layered and more multi-benefit, whereas there might a lower intensity would be only having kind of like 1 or 2 possible uses. And then if you create an environmental priority, a category that really is a place that's not for people, you know, it's the marsh. It's got visual aspects, but it doesn't have, you know, usage for them. So one of the questions that I think is before us tonight is, you know, do we agree with the level of surface recommendations? And I mean, I kind of do this for a living and I don't really know if I do or not. I mean, I think there's some data and we're certainly comparing it to our current facilities. And they do seem to make intuitive sense, but I can't really hang that on anything. And so you sort of have to figure out, I don't know, what were the maybe kind of get a little bit more into how they were created. In terms of a discussion or something that we can reference, a sister community or something like that. I think we haven't even really tackled the spatial distribution piece at all, and that's clearly something that people are sort of dying for, and it sort of relates to level of service in a way, but that it may be that what we end up with is more like a goal for spatial distribution rather than a plan. That's, I do acknowledge that we probably won't have a plan for the spatial distribution, because now that we're a built out community, it's not like a green field where you can, you know, draw a dot on the map and say, oh, park there, and there, and there, and there, and hopefully you have to make one there. We're built out and we're gonna be opportunity driven. So our spatial distribution is gonna be more, you know, dynamic, and we have to kind of go with it, like the way the city acquired the 2 adjacent parcels on San Rafael Street or whatever avenue. You know, that we were driven by that opportunity more than the actual, you know, dot on the map saying put a park right here. And then I was starting to think about in planning, you know, transportation planning, you know, there's been this wholesale move away from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. And I was trying to figure out like what it would be the equivalent in park planning. There was a good reason to move away from level of service because it was forcing roads away from what people wanted from roads. They were becoming wider and wider and wider, yet that's less humane, less walkable. People want walkable space. So I don't really know the answer to this, but that's the other piece of level of service being, you know, acreage driven. It's not, we don't want acreage. We want, you know, beautiful parks that are biodiverse with places to grow food and a variety of intensities that make people's lives better, you know? And so it's like, that's back to the mission and vision. So again, measure what you want to create. We aren't for acres, we're for the other stuff I just said. Okay.
Right, any further?
Yes. So I completely agree. Someone just said, it's not about acres. Otherwise, I mean, the level of service tells us we have plenty of public, so we have plenty of space. Let's not worry about it. We want usable space. We want space to be used the way our residents said they wanted us to use it. We don't have that. We don't have written anywhere what we want. And only when we know what we want can we start measuring what we want. The city of Mountain View, I spent 8 years on council doing general plans and precise plans. And those were not, here a consultant take the data, come back with the plan. Those were step by step, plenty of public input, plenty of bringing it back, checking whether that was made sense for us, changing it, bringing it back again. The city is, this weekend I looked at the Moffett Boulevard precise plan. And that's how it is. There's ideas presented. Then there is buy-in or not buy-in. then there are steps forward in recommendations. We are doing that in reverse order. Okay, what I'm hearing my fellow commissioners say is, so that's the way it's been, so that's the way it's been. A strategic plan is not an operational manual for staff, although actually I see no recommendations for recreation planning. When are we talking about recreation planning? In June, in September?
June.
Nothing here, nothing here says anything about that, and I thought the whole point was to have both. I
The
personally.
purpose of tonight was specific to this, been discussed as a tool. It is one piece of the larger plan. And I do understand the desire to take a slower approach. And it was our original intent to have more meetings throughout the process. That was our original intent. As we have gone through this process, and reviewing the chapters that we have been able to view as a staff to date, we haven't seen the whole thing yet. Even it was difficult for us to just be looking at one piece without seeing the next piece and then the next piece. And so similar to what you're hearing tonight is we see a little bit, but what about this and what about that? And that's where we started to say it may be better for you to see the plan and be able to react to it compared to, well, what about what's next? And so that's where we as staff are coming from, is that even as we were trying to decipher how best to bring the plan in pieces, it's actually better to see more of it than less of it, which we were originally planning to do. And so as we went through the process, we were recognizing the more information you have to react to, it's actually going to be better, compared to the opposite way, where we felt it would be more frustrating and not we're creating more questions than we are answers in the other direction.
I would really love to hear from the rest of the commissioners an insistence to get to look at this. The vision and the goals are what needs to drive this. I can't look at the vision, at the goals, at the recommendations, at the analysis, all in one go and say, well, fine, I guess it's been 2 years, it's too late now. That is
And
not.
This eye right here
that-
that you missed, yeah.
That is really not something that I can be proud to put my name on. We're not a rubber stamp. I mean, if what we're doing is being a rubber stamp, I'm wasting my time. I could be doing something else. This is not the right way to go about it. And as I was trying to think, I don't want to be negative. I appreciate staff. I know you've worked very hard. I don't just want to say negative things. What are the steps forward? The steps forward are, let's start seeing at least the goals and the vision to make sure we're going in the direction we want, that all the input we've got. I looked at the input from the residents and said, hurrah, everyone agrees with me. Isn't that wonderful? And now, a huge package, even with 10 days to look at it, is going to be difficult to pick apart, to start the logical reasoning of seeing, okay, we agreed on the vision. These are our goals. This is how we're getting at them. You can do that all in 10 days. What are we saying? Or this is something that we would like to see.
I'm fine. I mean, I I think I've expressed how I felt in, earlier, so I have nothing else to add, really.
Just a question for Renee. Just follow, I'm sorry, I'm taking my third turn, but given where we are, is there a way to, and I don't know whether this is allowable or, we get what we get in June, but rather than getting that one shot at it in June, we look at chapters 1 and 2 in June, and then we look at chapters 3 and 4 in a couple weeks. I mean, again, I'm just given where we are now, as opposed to turning it around immediately and saying June is our one shot, and I don't know.
I didn't see June as being our one shot, to be honest with you.
I think what
We have other meetings dedicated already.
Correct.
And the fact of, I could see us having the whole thing, but then maybe only covering parts of it
Right.
in June.
Yeah, that's what I was,
So if I may, since it was a question directed at me,
I'm just trying to find a
okay, so my sense is that June, we are getting the finished draft. The September meeting is for if we have edits we want to make, staff can decide whether they want or can make those edits, and the final draft will come in September. Which means finished package. I would like, we're only in March, I would like in May to see the goals and the vision and some idea of how that connects to the recommendations. How about if we disagree with the vision? How about we disagree with the goals? Between June and September, changes are going to make. Already it's too late to make many changes, but you can't have buy-in until you've agreed on the vision. I mean, I haven't participated in planning where the consultant is coming to us to tell us what the vision is. The vision is ours, our residents, what we heard from the residents. This is not an exercise for staff. This is an exercise for the city. Or this is a document for the city, for our direction. I've said this a number of times. Look, one more thing. I've said this practically at every meeting, and it's always been, you will see it. We're in March. It's going to council in November.
You had one other comment?
Yeah, but you haven't gotten to say anything.
So here's my view. So I think the ask for tonight, the comment, I think we've all generally agreed with the calculations. I think there's broad agreement that there's concern about the development of the plan. My sense is, I think the staff has heard us. I think they've heard the concerns. Let them come back with the things they want to present to us, hopefully with enough time to review it. And then we negotiate the timeline from there and whether we're going to support it going to council in November, whatnot. But let's let the next piece roll out that we do have something to respond to. But then I hope there'll be some ability to negotiate from there based on what we see. So that's a comment, and I don't need a response. And then you have one more comment, and then we're gonna go to staff.
Well,
announcements.
so the place that we are right now, unfortunately, we've got this super hardworking, dedicated professional staff. And we're kind of sounding like we're on the opposite side of them, where when we really aren't, we're together and we rely on staff and we need staff. I mean, they do this full time. We just dabble in it on our, second and fourth Wednesdays. So, the truth is, we weren't going to develop strategies in the plan. We need the staff and consultants. And so how do we get be doing it together. And so what I feel like we don't need a fully written 400-page document. What we need is the meat of each chapter to come to us. This level of service, okay, that's one part of it, but one of the problems is we're not able to evaluate it because we don't have the other meat of the other chapters. So, you know, ordinarily, you know, there would be, you know, step by step working through. Sometimes people go from the lowest level up and they're driven by inventory analysis. Other people want to be driven by the kind of vision and mission and the high level stuff and work that into the bit, right? Both ways actually work. You can also do it through scenarios. They've taken this tack and the consultants signed up for this, and I don't want to mess with this scope. That's money. But we need to, my take is that, you know, we need to start getting the guts. And by that I mean the essential content that there will be words around, the essential maps, the essential strategies. And we aren't seeing those, and there's almost no point in writing this beautiful document with graphic design and, you know, pagination and double-sided and all that. Like, that stuff takes forever. We would just want the content. We want to see the content and see it often, and it'll unfold. And yeah, we have to kind of like be patient, which is hard to stage. You know, like really want to dig in. So, and so does the community. They're ready to start seeing the guts. So I don't know, that would be what I would wish for, is to start unfolding, telling us a story with smaller, less written out, time consuming stuff.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I think, did you want to respond?
Just briefly.
All right, you've got 30 seconds.
We get the time.
Oh, I don't know.
Wait a minute, hold on.
So we've heard a lot and we appreciate the feedback. Let us go back and look at the developed timeline, see what we can bring back as far as next steps.
Yeah, and we, again, hearing Sandy nailed it very well. We still need to see the meat of each thing to be able to provide something to you. We can't provide something to you that we haven't seen yet. So again, patience will be very helpful for us. But we've heard a lot of great feedback. If you haven't noticed, I'm like in college scribbling notes. And so we will take this into consideration, debrief as a team, and we'll go from there. So again, I appreciate the level of importance this is on this plan from our community and the commission. And I want to reiterate, this is extremely important for the city staff. This will be guiding us over the next 10, 15 years and will provide us with really great data to be able to fall back on and to be able to set ourselves up for success in the future. So right now we're building the foundation and we're looking forward to building the house upon it. So I just want to say thank you for the feedback this evening.
Great. Well, I have confidence that you've heard us, I think, and looking forward to the next step, and I'm sure there'll be more robust discussion then. So we'll close down this item and
I just want to quickly say thank you to Mr. Bott for joining
what time
us.
is it, Neely?
Yeah, we're what, 1:30 in the morning?
I'm speaking to you from tomorrow, so yeah.
Thank you, Neely. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Bye-bye now.
All right, bye. Thank you, Neely.
Staff announcements.
I would,
Sequel troll this weekend.
I'm gonna hand it over
All
to
right.
Recreation Manager Colin James.
Hi, Commissioners, how are you? Use the voice. So last time we spoke, or I was here, I have some exciting news that, and as you know, Rangsdorf Park Aquatic Center is open to the public. We are right now currently in our soft opening phase, which means that means we have a grand opening coming up as well. So grand opening will be on March 29th at 10 a.m. There'll be ribbon cutting and dedication ceremonies, along with ceremonial first swims, and then an open house and community photo. We also recently had our first day of spring and summer registration. And again, just like last year and the year before, we exceeded our registration numbers. So just for some quick numbers for you, in spring, summer 2024 combined total registrations, we had 8,361 participants registered. As of today, for spring, summer 2025, we have 6,677 participants registered. That's 80% of what we ended with last year. And then this Saturday, we have Multicultural Festival, 10 a.m., rain or shine, so be there. And then we also have next week, Teen Week. So some of the highlights of Teen Week, we have art showcase in City Hall, style swap, cultural diversity fair, teen art in the dark, and then also a teen open mic night. And then last, coming up in April, will be the Earth and Arbor Day celebration at Rangsdorf Park and the Community Center. And that will also be from 10 to 2.
Thank you, Colin.
Sounds like that's it for staff updates tonight.
Also go to bed. At 10:29.
Can I just say one thank you?
Oh, yes.
Staff reports are great. I appreciate them. Teen Center rocks. Unbelievable what they're doing. As a person that works with teens, I really appreciate everything they're doing and some really good stuff. But the whole reports, I really appreciate. In case I know we don't cover them, but understand that I certainly read them, and they're really good. So thank you very much for putting the time you do it.
Pictures are always. Yeah, thank you for the comments.
Thank you.
With that, at 10:30, I adjourn the meeting.